Hello everyone and welcome to the MoeGamer podcast. I'm Pete Davison from MoeGamer.net and also somewhere else now that I'll talk about in a moment. But first I will introduce my regular co-host, Mr. Chris Kasky of ckaskyart.com. I keep forgetting. That's right, isn't it?
No worries.
I keep wanting to say MrGilderPixels.com and it's not that anymore.
Yeah, it's not. It doesn't. Any mistakes will not detract from my upwards of 3 views a week. So I'm not terribly concerned.
Oh, that's all right then. Well, so before we start then, a little bit of, I guess you'd call it housekeeping and some announcements and stuff. So, as well as working on MoeGamer in my free time, I've recently been hired by a site called Rice Digital, who are an outlet for games writing and a bit of popular culture from Asia, Japan, that sort of thing. And they also have a store that sells lovely limited editions of various games. So currently at the moment they're selling the Birthday Suit Collector's Edition of Galgun Returns, which is very nice. So the majority of my writing now you will probably find over there for the minute, because that's my day job now. And now I have a day job that I enjoy, that I don't spend 85% of the day being bored and writing articles about anime girls in my in my downtime. I'm actually getting paid to do it now. So do stop by ricedigital.co.uk and you'll see what I'm up to every day. We've also got a team of very nice writers who are working with me as well to produce stuff each and every day as well. And Rice Digital also has a YouTube channel as well, so you'll see some gameplay videos, some article readings and all sorts of other things over there as well. That's youtube.com/Rice Digital. So that's my shilling for my day job out of the way. That's a lot of fun so far, but also it has meant that I'm having to pull back a little bit on some of my own personal projects, just because I'm spending all day doing these things now, and it's nice to have a little bit of free time in the evenings. But yeah, all good. So how you been, Chris?
Oh, I'm doing just fine. painting and gaming.
Yep.
I've gotten back into collecting toys this year, which is something I had gotten away from in a long time ago, so I've been having a lot of fun with that.
I'm not allowed to do that.
You're not allowed to do that? That's probably because you would buy like $300 like PVC waifu statues and then dote on them. It's
a fair assumption, but also my wife was good enough to line pretty much every wall in our living room with shelves for games and collector's editions and so on. So making some space for waifu figures as well is probably a little bit unreasonable, which is fair enough, I think. Also, if I've got 300 quid to spare, I would rather spend it on games than on waifu figures as well, however lovely some of those Neptunia figures over the years have been.
I've started donating plasma, which is something that pays in the States. I think we discussed this. I don't think it pays in the UK because
it doesn't. No, you get a chocolate biscuit.
you have a functional healthcare system, so you don't need to incentivize goodwill with money. But in the States, if you donate plasma, which is different from donating blood, you get paid. And I'm funding my toy collecting almost exclusively with money I'm earning from my blood.
Nice.
So it's not dipping. It's not dipping into my. It's not dipping into my game acquiring at all.
Wow, all good. Yeah. No, I did look into it after you mentioned it, but no, you don't get paid over here at all for it. You get a chocolate biscuit and that's about it. Oh, right. Okay, so today's episode, it's been a little while since we met, so we've got a few bits of news and what we've been playing to go through for the first 2 segments of the show. And for the third segment of the show, we're just going to have a fairly nice, light and breezy discussion of some of our favourite pieces of music from games. And specifically, we're going to be looking at our favourite pieces of music from first areas of games, first levels, that sort of thing. Basically, not necessarily actual opening themes to games, but the sort of the first things you hear once you get into the gameplay side of things. So we will talk more about those in the third segment. But first of all, then, we have some news to go through. And as I say, there's several weeks worth here. So, let's just get cracking. So first of all, the first story we've got here is that Akiba's Trip Hellbound and Debriefed is launching May the 20th in Japan for PlayStation 4 and Switch. Since this was first announced, Xseed have also confirmed that it is coming west as well. So this is getting a 10th anniversary edition for PS4 and Switch over here. Which is pretty much the same as the Japanese limited edition that they're doing, that contains an art book and 2 soundtrack CDs. And that'll be about $50 compared to $40 for the standard version's price tag. This is a remastered version of the first Akiba's Trip game, which is the one that we didn't previously get in the West. The one we got previously was actually Akiba's Trip 2 that came out for PS3 and Vita and PS4. So it'd be nice to play this for the first time. Are you familiar with the series at all?
In passing, I haven't played it. You're quite fond of the one we did get, right?
Yeah, I was when I did play Akiba's Trip Undead and Undressed on Vita several years back now. I was really impressed because it was not at all what I was expecting. I was expecting sort of kind of a arena combat ecchi brawler type thing where you knock people's clothes off, but no. Instead, what I got was basically otaku yakuza, which is great. So, with what Yakuza does for the Kamurocho region in Tokyo, Akiba's Trip kind of does that for Akihabara. So it's got this lovingly crafted 3D recreation of Akihabara that you can wander around and explore. And it's got the real stores there that you can go in and you can buy stuff from. And you can often buy things from those stores to use as weapons or armor. So like you can dress up in different outfits, and the different outfits have different armor ratings and amounts of hit points and so on. And then there's this ridiculous story to follow through as well, where people are creating artificial vampires, and you have to deal with them by exposing them to the sunlight. They are invulnerable to sunlight from the neck up, which means that in order to expose them to the sunlight and destroy them, you need to tear all of their clothes off. And so the combat sequences in Akiba's Trip involve sort of weakening characters until they're a state where you can grab like their shirt or their trousers or their shoes or whatever, and then just whip them off. And it's great fun. It's great fun. It's got a really fun story. Like I say, the world building is fantastic. It's got a bunch of Yakuza style side quests to explore as well as the main story as well, and it's a very worthwhile use of your time if you haven't played it before. The first one I'm not familiar with at all. Like I say, that didn't come west beforehand, but I assume it's more of the same. Akiba's Trip 2, I think, was originally built for PS3 and Vita rather than being ported. The first Akiba's Trip was originally a PSP game, so it's probably going to be a little bit more dated in terms of structure and aspects of its presentation, but I believe the main concept of it is the same. So, yeah, definitely going to be one to keep an eye out on.
Cool. Yeah, I was pretty excited to see this because I knew we didn't get the first one, so this would be a good opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Right, moving along, we've got a story that Nintendo has acquired Next Level Games. I had to look up who these guys were, but they've done a bunch of really good stuff, actually.
Yeah.
Next Level Games did Super Mario Strikers on GameCube, Mario Strikers Charged, and the really good version of Punch-Out for Wii. Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon is probably the one of theirs that I'm most familiar with. That's the 3DS one. And Metroid Prime Federation Force, but we won't hold that against them. They also did Luigi's Mansion 3 most recently on Switch as well. So,
yes, which I will be talking about in our next segment.
Excellent. I would love to hear more about that. So yeah, Nintendo has agreed to basically acquire these guys completely and make them a wholly owned subsidiary, which makes a lot of sense given that they've worked on some sort of reasonably high-profile things for Nintendo. They worked on some big franchises for Nintendo. Obviously, the Mario sports games are sort of a little bit off sort of the center of attention of Nintendo, but Luigi's Mansion is sort of becoming a much bigger deal for Nintendo, especially with how well received Luigi's Mansion 3 was. Punch-Out, I remember being a big deal when it came out. Yeah, so this makes perfect sense. So, good for them. Continuing on, we're getting an Ultimate Edition of the King of Fighters 14, which includes all DLC fighters, which means Chris can finally buy it. Yes, so what does this include over the base game? It's got 8 DLC characters, 10 DLC costumes, and 10 PS4 themes as well, if you care. So, yes, this is out now. I was going to say it will arrive on January the 20th, but we're well past that now.
Yeah, but there are physical editions up for pre-order on Play Asia, English language, Asian region English language. So, I mean, I guess if you care about online play, that's going to be problematic depending on your region. But if you don't care about online play like yours truly, there will be physical English copies available. And I believe those are shipping in April.
Good stuff. Yeah, so this is a really good deal now if you want to get into a particular fighting game, because there's 58 characters in the game now, with a bunch of extra costumes. Apparently there is a physical version coming to Europe sometime this spring as well. So not sure what's happening there. North America themselves aren't getting a physical release, which hence the Play Asia English release. But yeah, it looks like there is going to be a European release of this as well, so that may be an alternative for those of you who want to import a copy of that.
Yeah, and this is
we're seeing a surprising number of times that's happening at the moment. We're seeing stuff getting a physical release in Europe but not in North America, which I mean, it sucks for you, but having lived through the PS1 era, I'm ecstatic about.
No, it's true. I mean, this has been going on for quite some time, actually. Even thinking back to Bloodborne.
Yeah.
The PAL territories got a physical edition with all the DLC that I had to import. It's kind of silly too. There's like weird variations between territories for certain games. Like something I'm looking into getting. I really like the Shadow of Mordor games.
Yes.
The basically Lord of the Rings Assassin's Creed.
Yeah.
But and I like them a lot. They play really nice. The combat's a lot of fun, etc. But anyway, the US version of the complete edition of that, the DLC is just a code. But the PAL version, it's straight up 2 discs. 1 disc with the DLC on it. So, like, it's very interesting. I don't know why. or maybe it has something to do with, like, regulations or, like, requirements or perceptions in the Euro region. With Asia, it has a lot to do with the instability of internet connectivity.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of writing about that.
I think part of it is also down to how active certain distributors are in certain regions. I'm actually skipping ahead to something I posted a bit later here, but Numbskull Games recently announced a bunch of stuff. They did a showcase video on YouTube where they announced that they're doing physical releases of a whole bunch of things, including Battle Axe, which is one thing I know we're both excited about. But one that really jumped out to me was that they're also doing a release of Brigandine as well, which... Yes. Limited Run did recently, and at the time I wasn't able to order that, so this basically gives me another chance to get my hands on Brigandine, and indeed for anyone else who missed a Limited Run to get their hands on Brigandine as well. So, and that's coming in April 2021. But Numbskull are a UK company, so obviously a lot of their business is done in Europe. So yeah, I guess this sort of pattern is mostly to do with that sort of thing, but.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the indie sphere. Like I import Euro region indie games on physical through Play Asia like a ton. I have like 5 or 6 on pre-order right now. Morbid, The Seven Acolytes, Wallachia, Reign of Dracula, Golden Force. Those are just the ones I can think of off the top of my head. But all got PAL region physical releases, but not in the West.
Yep. And of course the nice thing about living in the HD age is that PAL releases don't suck compared to NTSC versions anymore as well. So you lose nothing. It's great. Excuse me. Right.
Yeah, I have a ton of Euro games.
Cool. All right. Moving on. Square Enix has trademarked 3 Final Fantasy VII related names, which include Ever Crisis, the First Soldier, and the logo for the Shinra Electric Power Company. They haven't announced what these are yet, but speculation is something to do with Final Fantasy Before Crisis and Crisis Core. Perhaps some sort of spin-off of that or remaster of that, or who knows. The First Soldier will probably be fairly obvious to fans of Final Fantasy VII. That'll explore sort of the soldier forces in some way, but may well go further into things like Sephiroth's backstory, Zack's backstory, and that sort of thing. But yeah, we don't know exactly what these are about yet, but it would make perfect sense for Square Enix to go in hard on Final Fantasy VII Remake and related material, given how well that was received, especially in comparison to Final Fantasy 15. Final Fantasy VII Remake seemed to be sort of much more universally praised than 15 was, so it makes sense for them to go hard on it.
Yeah, people sure love FF7. Understatement of the century.
Yeah, it's all right. It's quite popular. All right, moving on. A DS game from 2011 called Monster Tale is being re-released on modern game platforms. That was announced by Majesco and developer Dream Rift. So this is a game that is a combination of puzzle platformer, open structure 2D platformer, and pet management as you rid the monster world of the evil ragtag group, the Kid Kings. I'm not familiar with this, but a fair few people seemed quite excited about this when it was announced. So are you familiar with this one?
Oh yes.
Yeah, okay.
One of those. DS, the
DS.
DS original's amazing. It's like one of my favorite DS games. It is so good. And some of the pixel artist who did this would go on to do Henry Hatsworth, which was also a game that I love on the DS.
Yeah, I am familiar with that one.
Yeah, this is a really good game.
Cool.
I don't really have anything else to say besides that. It's super cute and sweet and great pixel art and just fun to play. And this was made in the age before like the open structure 2D platformers were like a dime
everywhere.
A dozen. Yeah. It was like so when this came out, it was quite special because there just wasn't a ton of other entries in this genre that weren't overtly Castlevania or Metroid first party. So for its time, it was quite a special game when it came out.
Cool. Well, I'll watch out for that one then. It sounds very good, and like I say, there's been a lot of very positive buzz around that. So, right, no further news on that at the moment, though. It's just coming in 2021. That's all we know for the moment, I believe. All right, next story we've got is that Itagaki, formerly of Tecmo and creator of the Dead or Alive and Ninja Gaiden series, has established a new game studio, and he's also open to a potential Microsoft acquisition as well. So, what has he been up to recently? He says for the past 4 years he's been teaching to foster juniors, but he's decided he wants to make a game again. So he's decided to form a company to sort of push himself back in that direction. And his current plan is to release something for PlayStation 5, Xbox Series, and PC via Steam. But I don't think we know what he's doing yet, do we? No.
Yeah, I don't think there's any.
Yeah, so he's just said he's making a game. That's about it for the minute. But yeah, that's cool. That's cool. I like Itagaki's work. He's got a very sort of distinctive sense of style and how he puts games together as well. And it's not just a matter of bouncing tits, although that's usually involved. Yeah, so interested to see what he comes up with.
Yeah, I never played Devil's Third. Did you ever play Devil's Third?
That's one of those games that sort of, well, one of many games that got critically panned, but a lot of people who spent a lot of time with it really like it.
Yeah.
I own a copy, but I haven't booted it up yet because it's one that I want to give a proper sort of amount of time to, because I think it's going to be worth investigating in a bit more detail. I believe the multiplayer in that was supposed to be surprisingly good as well, though I doubt anyone's playing that anymore, or even if you can play it anymore.
It was mostly designed around the multiplayer. It's one of those games where like the single player was kind of an afterthought.
Yeah. I know it's supposed to be one of those interesting games that a lot of people bounced off, so that means we'll probably love it. So,
yeah,
all for that.
Indeed.
Okay, next up, a slightly less positive story, unfortunately. The two Utawarerumono games for PlayStation 4 and Vita don't appear to be on the PlayStation Store anymore. So this was Mask of Deception and Mask of Truth, which are the second and third Utawarerumono games. They just got delisted without warning one day for some reason. The Prelude to the Fallen, which is the recently released version of the first game in the series, which NIS America did last year, is still available. and Utawarerumono Zan, which is the sort of action RPG spin-off, is still available as well. But for some reason, Mask of Truth and Mask of Deception do not appear to be there anymore. Actually, this was a few weeks since this was announced. I'm just going to check if they've actually come back since then. I haven't seen anyone saying that they are, but I'm just going to have a quick check as we speak, just in case. Utawarerumono. I can spell it, I just can't say it.
I believe it was a licensing issue.
There's Prelude to the Fallen. There's Zan. There's a whole bunch of DLC. Nope, they're still gone. So don't know what's happening there. I think you can still get them on Steam, but for whatever reason, they're not on the PlayStation Store anymore. So who knows what's going on there? As you say, may well be licensing issues. They may well be back at some point. But there are physical releases of both of those as well. So if you want to add those to your collection, that might be your best bet now. You can get that whole series in physical form as well. So if you are a collector, that's worth getting your hands on. Okay, next story. A developer who has worked on God of Protectors for Ancient and Protect Me Knights, which are sort of favourite games of ours. They have a new NES and Famicom game on the way called Blazing Rangers that's coming out in summer of this year. This is a firefighting-based game. A building filled with children is on fire and you have to extinguish the flames to reach them. And there's single and two-player co-op options available. And there's a nice video sort of previewing what it's all about, and it's got a wonderfully exaggerated Japanese song over the top of it as well, so that's worth your time. So yeah, they're actually going to be selling this on a Famicom or NES cart as well. Have they said if they're going to actually port it to modern platforms as well? I don't think they have they? Doesn't look like it.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know offhand. Well, it's pretty amazing too. It's like First Press Games is going to have these carts, and what they've done is actually quite cool. There's actually you can buy one of 3 different versions. So you can actually buy a Famicom cart, a Euro style NES cart, or a American style NES cart, and each one of those has a different cartridge sticker, instruction manual, and box.
Cool.
all stylized off of the different like the different art styles you would have expected for those.
Oh yeah, like even
80s.
the box art's different, isn't it? Yeah, there's like the awful Mega Man style art on one of them, and
yeah, that's right.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so.
That's either awesome or devilishly devious.
Yeah, I think I'll probably get the Famicom cart because I have I have an analog NT Mini now, so I can play Famicom carts. Because I obviously I want that cute anime style artwork. I don't want the hideous US Mega Man style artwork.
Of course.
Even though it's cool that they did it, I have no desire to pay $80 to own it. So.
Oh dear. Right. Okay, moving on. Next story. Final Fantasy XIV has announced its new expansion, which is called Endwalker, and that will be available in the autumn of this year. So what this is going to do, this is going to wrap up the currently running main story that has been running since A Realm Reborn onwards through Shadowbringers. So that story will apparently come to an end at the conclusion of the base story of the expansion, which means that when they get into the patch cycle every 3 months after the expansion releases, it will be into sort of the start of a new overarching plot, which is all very exciting. So for those not familiar, the sort of big story in Final Fantasy XIV from A Realm Reborn onwards has been the conflict between sort of light and dark. So there's been the conflict between Hydaelyn, who is sort of the mother crystal that sort of watches over all of existence and embodies light and that sort of thing, and Zodiac, who will be familiar to people who have been sort of paying attention to the Final Fantasy series as a whole, and sort of alongside all the stuff that's going on in the main plots of the expansions, that's sort of been rumbling away in the background. So some sort of resolution is going to come to that as part of Endwalker. The new expansion is going to have 2 new jobs. I think they've only announced one of them so far, which is Sage. The other one, I think, was going to be another DPS, but they haven't said what it is yet. It will raise the level cap from 80 to 90. You'll be able to go to Garlemald, which is like a major location that we haven't seen in Final Fantasy XIV yet. It's been talked about a lot, but we haven't been there yet. You'll be able to fight Anima, participate in a high-end raid called Pandemonium, which is presumably based on Final Fantasy II, and you go to the moon. So this is going to be the Final Fantasy IV expansion, basically. Mm-hmm. So each of the main expansions has kind of been sort of loosely inspired by one of the previous Final Fantasies. So we've had sort of Final Fantasy V and Final Fantasy VI and a bit of Final Fantasy III paid homage to along the way. So this is very obviously going to be the Final Fantasy IV expansion. So so a lot coming on there. Estinian, who is a popular character, is being added to the game's trust system, so you'll be able to fight alongside him in dungeons. There'll be a new housing location, and there's a new mode where you can cultivate your own private island, raise animals, and play with your minions. So, it's doing a sort of Animal Crossing type thing from the sound of things as well. So
cute. Why is this game so good? I wish I liked all my those.
It's because the people who make it, they really care about it. Like if you listen to Yoshi P talking about Final Fantasy XIV, he loves it, and like he refers to it as his life's work. And it absolutely is. Even though he's also working on Final Fantasy 16, this is his life now. This is what he does. And he obviously absolutely loves every minute of it. And it really comes across in what the game does. So
it drives me nuts that I can't play it. Like a group of my buddies started playing it, and they had never played it, mm-hmm. 2 weeks ago, and I'm like, ah! But I know I'll play it for 2 weeks and then get out of it again. I'm resisting so hard. I would,
yeah. I've actually been revisiting it recently, and I've been exploring the New Game Plus mode that they added. Which allows you to take your current character and basically rewind the story right back to the beginning if you want to, or pick a particular chapter that you want to play again, and you can replay the whole main scenario, including sort of the single player instance battles and all the main story quests and that sort of thing. You don't get any rewards for doing it. It's a pure story exercise.
Sure.
But it's just a really nice addition, particularly if you've had a few years off like I have and you want to kind of get back up to speed.
So is it proper New Game Plus? You keep all your gear and your level, so you can just breeze through it and enjoy the story?
Yeah, exactly. You keep your character as it was, and you just activate New Game Plus mode, and that basically resets the open world to the state it's in at various points in the main scenario. So, characters are in the right place, you can go and talk to them, quests are open, that sort of thing. But yeah, you're just playing your level 70, 80, 90 character or whatever.
That would be a fun way to grind up a new job class, because sometimes it's you want to start a new job class, you don't really know what to do when you're in end game content. Yeah. The downside to it is you don't get any rewards for the quests, so you don't get any experience rewards for the quests, but you do get experience for sort of mobs you kill. You do get experience for if you run a dungeon with other people, you get the dungeon experience and so on. So it's probably not ideal for doing that. But there are multiple ways that you can grind up a new class now, with probably the best one being the Palace of the Dead and Heaven on High, which are the two randomly generated dungeons. You can go and run those solo, and each set of 10 floors you clear in those, you get a massive chunk of experience. So those are great for leveling. So yeah, there's no need to just sort of grind one thing over and over anymore. There's lots of different ways to get other classes up to speed. You're not doing a good job of convincing me not to play it.
Hey, if I've signed up again and if I have to suffer, someone else has to suffer alongside me. Anyway, let's move on from that before I convince you any further. We mentioned God of Protectors a moment ago, but they've announced that the English version of God of Protectors is complete. And that will bring it to Western audiences, which is very excited, because the 3DS version, they released that in America, didn't they? But not in Europe. Am I right?
I don't even know.
I know I was frustrated for some reason about that, because I couldn't play it because the 3DS is region locked. But yeah, this is coming to Switch, so you'll be able to play it wherever you like. If you've not come across this before, this is a series that originated on the Xbox Live Indie Games platform on Xbox 360, and it was a title that was just written in Japanese, so you had to know it was there. But it was so good. It was so good. It was an NES-inspired sort of single-screen arena battle thing where you had to defend a princess from incoming enemies from all sides. And you could play one of 4 character classes. You could upgrade those character classes, and you could play up to 4-player co-op as well. And it's just so much fun. And there've been a couple of games beyond that since, one of which was God of Protectors. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to being able to play this again in a means that's a little bit more accessible than Xbox Live Indie Games. Because Xbox Live Indie Games doesn't exist anymore, so you can't download it anymore. But if you have got it on your hard drive already, you can still enjoy it. So that is never getting deleted from my 360.
My dream is that someone will do a compilation cartridge when the third one is done and just put them all
That'd be
together.
cool, yeah. Yeah, that'd be cool. Noteworthy thing about this series, if you're not familiar, is that it's developed by Ancient, which is Yuzo Koshiro's company. So it's got music from Yuzo Koshiro and a few other composers.
He's going to come later.
Yeah. There's Yuzo Koshiro also made a big point of doing some alternative sound packs for it as well. So as well as the sort of iconic NES sound, you can also get DLC packs that put it into sort of FM synth mode and a recreation of the SNES sound chip and all that sort of thing as well. So you can have the different versions of the soundtrack. So yeah, that is on the way. Don't think there's a date for that yet, but the English version is complete now, so presumably it's just got to go through things like the certification process and manufacturing and that sort of thing. But keep an eye out for that one. Next up, we've got another acquisition story. Meteorise has acquired 100% of the shares of Alfa System, making it a wholly owned subsidiary. These are 2 names that I know the names of, but I can never remember what they've done. What have they worked on?
Alpha System, you know for their shmups. You just played
Sisters Royale. Yeah.
And they're famous for the Shikigami no Shiro series, which is their baby.
Yep.
Meteorise, I'm not super familiar with. They apparently developed Valkyrie Drive Bikuni and Senran Kagura Bon Appetit. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
but,
so that was the music game spin-off, and then Valkyrie Drive would have been alongside Kenichiro Takaki, wherever he was at the point that I think that was sort of just around the point he was establishing Honey Parade games there, so they would have worked alongside that. Okay, yeah, so I do know them. They're just sort of like all the stuff they've worked on I tend to associate with other people.
Yeah, which is why it surprised me that they were able to acquire this other developer. I mean, I'm sure Alpha Systems' fortunes were not exactly in super high, sky-high numbers there.
Yeah.
I mean, I can only name 2 games in the past, 8 years, I think, that they've made.
Yeah.
Mamoru-kun Curse, which was available for download on the PS3, and most recently Sisters Royale. But, yeah, it's just interesting. I hope this means together they'll both be able to continue to make interesting games.
It sounds that way, yeah. It sounds like this is mostly a money thing. It doesn't sound like they want to sort of interfere with any of the sort of creative process or anything like that. It sounds pretty much just like a sort of money thing. It's like, here, have some money and we can make stuff together.
Yeah, combine our fortunes.
Yeah, sounds cool to me.
Yeah, I mean, I love the specific style of Alpha System shooters. They were kind of one of the earliest proponents of creating graze systems in vertical shoot 'em ups. The idea that in a shoot 'em up, if you get close to an enemy bullet, it increases your power for the duration that you're close to that enemy bullet. So it's a very strong risk-reward mechanic. And I don't think they were the first game to do that, but they really made their name by kind of perfecting that and making games built around that. The whole Shikigami no Shiro series, as well as Sisters Royale, uses that mechanic at its core, and it's a lot of fun.
Cool. All right. Continuing on, we've got a announcement of an indie platformer called Dogworld, which is coming out on March the 18th for PC and then later in the year for Nintendo Switch. So this is a game that uses the 1-bit graphic style that's been quite fashionable among indie developers for now. It's like straight black and white. It's like black background, white graphics on top of it. and it claims to be a love letter to Cave Story, Mega Man, and Metroid. I've not seen this before, so what attracted your attention about this, other than sort of the things I've just mentioned?
It was mainly the things you just mentioned.
Yeah,
it was mainly just the graphics. I think that stark white on black is just such a really interesting graphical style. And I love to see what these indie devs do with it. I was a real big fan of Downwell.
Yes, it looks very much like Downwell. Yeah.
But besides that, I mean, like 1-bit is kind of misleading because it's like the two color is like nothing but white and red on black. But like, it's still higher res than like a traditional old game would be. So like, even with it just being the white, black, and red, there's a tremendous amount of detail and a lot of like the environmental work. Other than that,
I mean, to clarify for those who sort of aren't familiar with that terminology, the 1-bit is not referring to sort of processing power. In this case, it's referring to color depth. So one bit just means white or black. You have 1 bit, which is either on or off. If it's on, it's white. If it's off, it's black. So that's where that comes from. So it's not the same as saying that something has 8-bit graphics, which people tend to say when they're talking about something that looks like an NES game or something like that. So that's just a distinction worth making. But
sure,
it is a style that's become quite popular among indie developers at the moment, and it's oddly flexible as well. As you say, this game's got a nice amount of detail to it. Have you seen World of Horror at all?
No, I'm not familiar with that one.
World of Horror is it's basically a combination of adventure game and roguelike, and with some heavy inspirations from tabletop role-playing and board games as well.
Okay.
So it's kind of a point-and-click adventure with kind of randomly generated scenarios, but you also sort of run into random events along the way, and you have to use your stats and sort of do virtual dice rolls and stuff for things to happen. And that is all presented in 1-bit graphics as well, and it looks like an old Mac game.
Yes, like I have seen this. I'm looking at it now. I just didn't recognize the title.
Yeah, it looks like something you would play on the original Macintosh, and it's gorgeous. Like it's a very busy screen because there's lots of stuff, lots of information it's presenting with you at once. But it's a very distinctive look and feel. And like I say, it's been quite popular among a lot of indie developers recently. I really like it. So, but yes, Dogworld looks like it's going to be well worth a look. And you'll be able to do that next month from March the 18th on Steam, and as I say, coming to Switch later in the year.
I just like games that are shooty. I like Cave Story, I like guns, I like shooty, I like Contra. Looks like fun. And I love the open platform side scroller combined with that. Like that's a delicious combo for me. Specifically.
I would agree with you on that. I would absolutely agree with you on that. Okay, a couple more stories that we got coming on. Arc System Works announced that they are bringing a PS2 cult classic called Kowloon High School Chronicle to the West. As I record this, it actually came out on Nintendo Switch digitally the other day. But also, shortly after Arc System Works announced that digital release, P-Cube announced that they are doing physical releases of it as well. So you can order those from the Race Digital store, which I now need to push people in the direction of. But yeah, we've got physical limited editions of that coming out as well, and it's quite an affordable limited edition. It's not a box that's filled with lots and lots of goodies, but it's basically got the game, and it's got a trinket that hasn't been announced yet. But it's basically the price of a regular game rather than a limited edition. So if you want a copy of that on your shelf, grab it. If you've not come across this game before, this is basically the spiritual predecessor to what's it called, Tokyo Twilight Ghost Hunters.
That's a really interesting series.
Yeah, so it's a combination of adventure game and sort of social life sim, dating sim, and first person dungeon crawler as well. So it has a conversation system where you interact with characters, and rather than picking from dialogue choices, you choose the mood of your response. So you have like 9 different moods you can choose from to respond to people.
9?
And Yeah, 9. That many exist, you know. There's not just sad and meh. Yeah, so you have these 9 different options you could choose when you're talking to characters, and that affects your relationships with them and the stories that you go down. And then the dungeon crawling aspect, it's rather than being sort of heavily labyrinth based, as in a lot of dungeon crawling RPGs, it's more sort of room based. So you'll go from room to room, and each room will have some sort of gimmick in it. So it may have some enemies that you need to defeat in there, but it will probably also have some puzzles you need to solve in there as well. So it's kind of got a touch of almost escape room style stuff going on as well. But yeah, it looks like it's got really interesting combat as well, because it's got sort of tactical combat with movement in it as well. So most first-person dungeon crawlers tend to have sort of your party lines up, the enemies line up, and so on. But this one's got grid-based movement as well, so you can sort of position yourself to the side and behind enemies and that sort of thing, and move your party around and attack from different angles. So yeah, this looks like a really interesting game that I wasn't familiar with before it was announced, but it seems to be sort of quite a popular cult classic among people in the know. So I'm very much up for this. It's also got a whole built-in retro style game called Rockford Adventure in it as well, that's got some lovely pixel art. So
cool. Yeah, I mean, this is something that probably wouldn't have been on my radar until after you told me about it, but just like mechanically it sounds so interesting. And I'm specifically really interested in the Kowloon like theme and setting. There's been a lot of games historically with that setting, and like the weirdness and the history of the Kowloon setting is really interesting to explore. So yeah, this is going to be worth checking out for sure.
Yep, all good. And last thing I just wanted to mention, just a short story. Super Rare Games has announced their latest limited edition, which is coming in about 5 days' time at the time of recording. And that is they're doing a physical Switch release of Lonely Mountains Downhill, which is a really lovely game that I enjoyed a lot a few months back. It's a mountain biking game, unfolds from a sort of isometric style perspective, and it's got this lovely kind of low poly papercraft look about it. And it's just a really nice, relaxing game until you try some of the harder courses, and then it's the most infuriating game you'll ever play. But if you if you enjoy sort of those sort of skillful physics-style races with a touch of exploration and stuff, this is a really nice game, and I will probably pick this up because I really enjoyed the download version, and it's one that I would be happy to have on my shelf. So watch out for that. On from the 18th of February, they are pre-ordering it. So
I got the email about this, and I couldn't remember if this was the game you were telling me about or not, so I'm glad to hear it is.
Yes, it was. I've written about it on MoeGamer, and I think I did a video about it on YouTube as well, so you should be able to get a good idea of whether it's for you from that. But yeah, it's a good game. It's a wonderful sound design in that game. It's got the best sort of outdoor sounds I think I've ever heard in a game. That's cool. The nice sort of atmosphere. It's got sort of nice wind noises, and you can hear birds singing in the background and stuff, and it's just a really nice immersive sound that really adds to the atmosphere of it. So alright, good stuff. Any more news you want to cover before we wrap up?
No, I think that's the lion's share of it. It's
okay.
It continues with the world we live in right now, where like there's somehow no news and a ton of news. It's like we have to manufacture interest.
Well, we managed 45 minutes of news there, so that's not too bad. That's not too bad at all. All right, so we'll take a short break now, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about what we've been playing recently. So we'll see you in just a moment. Welcome back. For our second segment, we're going to talk about what we've been playing recently. So, what have you been up to, Chris?
Well, in this beautiful new world order, I've actually been able to beat video games.
Good lord.
Yeah, imagine that. So, I have just finished Ys Memories of Celceta.
Ah, very nice.
Which is, as most Ys games are, which kind of goes without saying at this point, absolutely lovely.
Mm-hmm.
for those unfamiliar with the particularly unique history of Memories of Celceta, it was developed as a Vita game and was rather recently also ported to Steam and the PS4, so it's available on a couple different platforms. What's special about Memories of Celceta is that it is a 3D from the ground up remake of Ys 4. Now,
but which one? Which one?
Indeed. So Ys 4 has a very interesting place in Ys series history. In that Ys 4 was outsourced. Traditionally, Ys games are developed by Nihon Falcom, but in the 16-bit era, Ys 4 was actually outsourced. There were 2 different versions, and each version was developed by a different developer. So there is the PC Engine CD version, Dawn of Ys, which is developed by Hudson Soft, and then there is the Super Nintendo version, Ys 4 Mask of the Sun, which was developed by Tonkin House for the Super Famicom. The Super Nintendo one largely serves as the narrative canon that they pulled for Memories of Celceta. So what they've done is, by taking hold of this, choosing which narrative they believe is the correct one to fit into the Ys timeline, they've essentially finally settled a long-standing dispute amongst Ys fans, and and Falcom has put the hammer down and said, This is it. This is the canonical story of Adel's adventures in Celceta. Done. So, I mean, it's really cool. It's cool that they decided to do that. I know there's a little bit of pissiness in like the fan community over some of the narrative choices or some of the story things they decided to make canon, but overall I just thought it was a really great game.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I really enjoyed this one. This was sort of the first kind of it wasn't the first party Ys, but I think it was the one where it sort of refines the formula a bit closer to what we see with Ys 8 and Ys 9 now, I think.
A lot of people didn't play Ys 7 because it came out at the tail end of the PSP's lifetime, and it has it been ported?
There's a PC port. There was originally like a weird Chinese PC port that floated around the internet for a bit, but they actually did an official PC port a couple of years back, so you can grab that on Steam now, I think. Good.
Yeah, but not a lot of people played Ys 7 originally back in the day, so Celceta was a lot of people's first experience with kind of 3D party Ys. Yeah. Because it came out kind of in the early days of the Vita, when there wasn't a ton of stuff to play on the Vita.
Yeah.
And so it kind of was one of the Vita's killer apps if you were a fan of Japanese gaming back in the day. So yeah, I mean, I don't know how many times in the history of this podcast have we explained Ys, but Ys is mostly overhead perspective action RPG, where it differs from other action RPGs is a distinct focus on a high tempo of action, like speed, combos, and attacks. This becomes particularly part of the formula in newer 3D Ys, what we call party Ys, because what they do is they give you multiple characters. Each character has a physical attack attribute, strike, pierce, or slash. Enemies have different weaknesses, so you're always encouraged to you run around in a party of 3, you're encouraged to rotate your characters actively to increase your effectiveness against the particular types of enemies you're facing at any given time. Celceta's really cool too, because it's clear in playing it that they were inspired by games like Castlevania and Metroid in developing the structure of the world. So it kind of feels like an open platform side-scroller in a lot of its mechanical hooks. The whole caveat of the story is that as Adel, the adventurer, you're exploring this continent, Celceta, which has a legendary forest that is dangerous and unexplored. So you're tasked with mapping this forest out. So in the same way as when you play Symphony of the Night and you fill in the map gradually as you explore, Memories of Celceta actually allows you to do that, but in an overhead action RPG. So you're running around this map. The map fills in as you explore it. You receive payout bonuses based on the amount of the map you've explored throughout various parts in the story. You unlock shortcuts eventually as you loop around different areas, and each of the characters you meet and recruit has a different ability that assists in navigation. So one character can use ice magic to close fissures and allow you to cross them. One character throws knives, and so you can like sever vines and make items drop into pits so you can cross them safely. One character can break walls. So as you progress in the story, you unlock more accessibility to continue to explore the environment more. So it's a really satisfying combination of this exploration alongside the really satisfying action combat as well. I just really, really enjoy it.
Yeah, it's a really fun game. It's been a few years since I played it now, but I remember enjoying it a great deal. Killer soundtrack as well, which goes without saying for an Ys game, of course, but a particularly good one in this one, I found.
Yes, absolutely. I'm embarking on a bit of a mission to get caught up on Ys. I'm gonna be diving into 8 very soon, which I only have really dipped my toes in for the first 5 or 6 hours worth. So I'm gonna start that over and actually burrow through it, because I really, really want to get to 9, because 9 speaks to me thematically. But I don't want to play it until I've given 8 its fair shake as well. So I know 8 is somewhat controversial for a number of points, but I found I really enjoyed what I had played of it so far, so I'm very much looking forward to it.
Good stuff. All right, anything else you've been up to?
Yes, I've also been playing. After I finished Ys, I immediately dove into Luigi's Mansion 3.
Right, tell me more.
Which I am absolutely loving the hell out of. I feel like I say this a lot, especially for like first party. I mean, this isn't a first party Nintendo game, as we covered. It was developed by Next Level Games, which have now been acquired as a subsidiary of Nintendo, but I was consistently surprised as I play this game that this wasn't developed by like in-house Japanese Nintendo Studio One.
Yeah.
Like the level of love and care put into crafting this game, it's unlike anything I've seen before. I was hesitant to play it, knowing it wasn't developed in-house by Nintendo, because I hadn't played Dark Moon on the 3DS.
Okay.
So I didn't really know what to expect. But, like, you know, I mean this as a compliment. This feels indistinguishable from an in-house developed Nintendo game.
Yeah.
You know, so the premise is that as Luigi, you are exploring this haunted hotel to try to save the Mario crew that have all been captured by King Boo. The hotel thing is kind of just like a loose theme, but like every floor of the hotel has a really unique like feature and theme. So some of them are make sense. Like some like one of the first floors you explore is just like the luxury suites, and then like one of the floors you explore is like this is where there's like shops in the hotel. But like they get weirder as they go up. for like I don't want to ruin them, but like one of them is like the quote garden suites end quote, and it's literally like a section, and the rooms are like overrun with like plants and flowers and like greenery, and so like now Luigi's Mansion has always been an interesting series because it kind of defies all genre definitions.
Yeah,
like Luigi's Mansion just kind of is Luigi's Mansion. Sometimes it feels like an action game because when you know you combat the ghosts when they come after you, and it's got a very action feel with its unique mechanics. Sometimes it feels like an adventure game because the real crux of the game is exploration and puzzle solving. But instead of traditional adventure game mechanics wherein you're finding items and applying them to situations to solve puzzles, Luigi's Mansion is built around the notion that you have a very limited skill set. The core of that skill set being your vacuum cleaner and your flashlight. You can suck and blow with the vacuum cleaner. You can pull on things if you get them stuck in the vacuum. You have a flashlight. Luigi's Mansion 3 adds additional things. You have a black light that you can use to reveal like hidden objects in the environments. You can do like a jump that like disrupts the environment around you, like knock things back.
Yeah.
And you also have Gooigi, which is a slime clone of Luigi that essentially allows you to have two Luigis in any scene at once to like combine their efforts to solve puzzles together. And then Gooigi can also pass through grating and fences and stuff. Mm-hmm. So those limited... Oh, also you can shoot a plunger out onto objects with a flat, clean surface, and then suck the plunger up with your vacuum to pull it, and you can use that to like smash objects or like swing them around. That limited skill set is it. You have pretty much everything within the first hour and a half of the game.
Yep.
Then there is no upgrade structure. There's no unlocking of items and weapons and abilities. There's no leveling up to make things powerful. The entirety of the game is literally just a consistent series of the developers flexing their muscle and their understanding of the skill set they've given you to craft unique puzzles to be solved with this limited skill set in very inventive and interesting ways. And it is constantly delightful. It is constantly surprising. Much like I was talking about Paper Mario Origami King in the previous episode, it rewards you for exploring every nook and cranny. There's always a silly gimmick to discover. Some puzzles you solve do little more than give you some gold, which you can spend on useful items that like a item that resurrects you if you die and stuff like that. But for the most part, you just do things in this game because it's fun to do them. I walked in the one of the floors is a magic themed floor, where everything is themed around performance magic. Mm-hmm. And you walk in the room and there's the classic saw lady in half, right? And the saw is embedded halfway into the box. And you go up to it, and if you suck and blow with the vacuum in front of the saw, you can make the saw go and finish the gimmick, and then that opens up, and then a ghost comes out, and then you fight the ghost, and you get some gold. Like, it's just... The game encourages you to think and wrap your head around the skill set you have to solve these really creative puzzles. And it's just... As someone who really loves to analyze mechanics and game design, this game just feels like a carefully constructed piece of clockwork. Nothing is extraneous. Everything is there for you to delight in what you can do and in service of the fun of exploration and making you feel smart when you figure something out.
Yeah.
It's just great. I'm just loving every minute of it.
Oh, that sounds great. I've not played that one yet, but I did play Dark Moon on 3DS. It was actually one of the first games I got for my 3DS, I think. But that was a lot of fun, and again, incorporate a lot of the things you're talking about there. So the nice different blend of genres and the fact that it didn't really feel quite like anything else. There was also a really, really good multiplayer mode in the 3DS version as well. I don't know if that's in the Switch version at all, but the...
Oh, yeah. I haven't played it myself, but yeah, the Switch version the Switch game has a big, robust multiplayer suite of like DLC packs that add additional challenges and levels. Like, it's a big part of the package.
Uh-huh. Oh, that's cool. The 3DS multiplayer was basically almost like a roguelike mode, I guess you'd call it, because it sort of gave you a randomly generated building, and you could... sort of apply various modifiers and stuff to it to make it more or less challenging, and then you just cooperated or competed against another player to sort of get the most points, suck up the most ghosts, find all the hidden stuff, and it was just really good fun.
Yeah, I believe it's similar in the new one. I don't have much multiplayer people to play with, but if you ever pick it up and you want to try it, I'm game for it.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
There's also local multiplayer.
Yes.
So like with Gooigi, you can actually have your friend control them locally, and you can play together to solve the puzzles cooperatively.
Oh, that's neat.
In single player mode.
Yeah.
Which is cool. You don't have to do that. It's similar to like how like in the Mario Galaxy you could have someone use a remote to help you pick up like the star bits or whatever. But not necessary, but it is fun. Like if you're playing with a friend casually.
Yeah. Little brother mode.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so.
Oh, cool. All right. Anything else you've been up to?
No, that's it. Unless you want to talk about Pack Attack some more. I got to level 50 the other day.
I think we covered that pretty comprehensively last time. So, yeah. Okay. What have I been up to then? I've been playing a few things. I have been playing a bit of... I can't remember if we mentioned this on the podcast before, but we've certainly talked about it off mic before. A bit of Hakoniwa Explorer Plus. I downloaded the Steam version. Not the Steam version, the Switch version, because I just felt like playing it on Switch. I'm still hoping that it will get a physical release at some point, but I just fancy playing it right now, so I did. So Hakoniwa Explorer Plus, if you've not come across it before, Hakoniwa means box garden, I believe, and that's to do with the sort of presentation of the game. It's from an isometric perspective. So it's got this lovely sort of isometric pixel art look about it. It's actually built with voxels rather than pixels, so it sort of does 3D properly. But they've made it so it looks like sort of conventional 2D pixel art. It's a really nice looking game. And it's a really unusual and interesting game as well, in that you start off and it doesn't really give you an objective. You just sort of wake up in this village. This girl in a swimsuit comes up to you and says, "Hey, you're an adventurer. Off you go. Go and have some adventures." And then from there, what you do is you just talk to people, and people might tell you about a dungeon or an interesting location nearby. You go and check out that dungeon or that interesting location. You find some treasure, you beat up some monsters, and then just repeat. That's all you do. But it's a pleasure to play, because it's just a game about exploring and finding stuff and experimenting with different weapons and upgrades and fighting monster girls who will crush you between their thighs. And yeah, it's a ton of fun. It's this sort of exploration centric thing is really nice, because each area you go into, a lot of them have different gimmicks. So, for example, you're going to this foresty area, and you'll be told at the start, well, you're quite likely to get lost in here, but if you keep heading in this particular direction, you'll eventually reach the exit. So you need to sort of go that direction when it's possible to, but it's not always possible to, for example. There's a desert sequence where you have to find the correct path by watching for the vegetation getting more and more kind of lush as you get closer to an oasis. So you have to figure out the correct sequence of directions to go in. Then there's dungeons with a bit of platforming in. There's dungeons with a lot of combat in. There's dungeons with hidden objectives that will unlock bosses to fight. All sorts of things. There's a very robust achievement system in it as well. Whereby you have sort of this basement that's full of trophies, and each area has a bunch of possible achievements you can get, that is anything from defeating a boss to finding like a hidden area and that sort of thing. And so you can look at the achievements to give you an idea of some of the things that you might want to try and do in the game. So it's a really nice use of achievements. None of them are like swing your sword 500 times or anything like that. It's all like climb to the top of the waterfall at First Bridge and find the magic mushrooms and that sort of thing. So it's just a game that really rewards having fun in the playground it gives you. It doesn't sort of give you a rigid structure or anything like that. You just approach it however you see fit, and it's a ton of fun. So
I love it. It's a bit like I've often found that's one of the reasons I like the hunting action RPG genre so much, like games like Monster Hunter and stuff.
Yes.
Because those games have like a story and like structured missions like that have a clear sequence, but at the end of the day, it's like setting your own goals and making your own fun is what makes them great for me. Like the decision that like I want to make this weapon. What's the sequence of missions I have to engage in to collect the right things to make that weapon? I really appreciate when games kind of have that more open feeling that allow me to kind of make my own fun.
Yeah, and that's exactly what you get here. So if you enjoy that sort of thing, this is a game well worth checking out, absolutely. Other thing I've been playing, I mentioned it earlier, but I've been playing Galgun Returns, which I've been looking forward to for a long time. So Galgun Returns is the modern re-release of the original Galgun that came out for Xbox 360 and PS3 originally, but didn't get released over here in that version. It was a Japan-only thing until Double Peace came along. So yeah, I've been really enjoying seeing where this series came from, seeing where some of its mechanics came from, seeing how the structure and mechanics of the first Galgun are a little bit different from Double Peace. And of course, discovering that being an Inti Creates game, there's sort of a ton of hidden depth to explore in there as well. So it's not just about sort of shooting targets as quickly as possible. There's a lot of stat manipulation, there's a lot of finding hidden stuff, there's a lot of figuring out exactly how sort of the various conditions for getting different endings and narrative sequences work and that sort of thing. So there's a ton of depth to it, a whole bunch of unlockables. There's like 80 characters to collect the profiles of. There's 4 main narrative routes plus some extra ones that you unlock when you've beaten them all. Additional game modes. It's just a ton of fun. Absolute ton of fun. I've always loved the Galgun games, and this sort of, by virtue of being the first game in the series, there are things that some of the subsequent games refined a little bit more, but there's also quite a nice simplicity to this one as well, that sort of keeps things focused. But yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, I was curious to see how you were finding it, especially, sometimes it's tough when your intro to a series is later entries, and then to go back to the first one can be a little jarring. So I'm glad to hear. To hear that it's been an enjoyable experience. Yeah,
so for those who sort of aren't familiar with the differences in the series, the first one we got over here was Galgun Double Peace, which sort of in terms of its high-level mechanics was pretty similar. It's a rail shooter where you have girls running towards you and you blast them to make them fall over in quasi-orgasmic ecstasy. And as you progress through the game, there's like several different narrative routes you can pick. And getting a satisfactory ending in those routes is mostly dependent on choosing the right dialogue choices. In Double Peace, before you started each level, you had a choice of different locations you could go to, so you could choose which your next level was going to be. And each level would have a series of requests that you could do along the way as well to unlock other stuff and get additional points. And they gave you currency that you could upgrade your skills with as well. The first Galgun is much simpler, so it lacks the request side of things, and each heroine's route just sends you through a predefined sequence of stages rather than giving you a choice. There's no upgrades either, so you can't put yourself in a position where things are much easier because you've upgraded your shot power, your health, or something like that. What you start the game with is what you end the game with, so it's all down to a combination of your own skill and making the right choices. But also, there are lots of nice things in the game that give you the helpful feedback you need to make those correct choices. So, for example, if you make the correct dialogue choice, it will play a noise that indicates you made the correct dialogue choice. So you don't have to sort of figure things out via sort of Byzantine methods or looking things up on Japanese wikis and that sort of thing like I've been doing for the last couple of days. You can actually tell it from the sound effect it makes after that. Manipulating your stats in the first Galgun is a bit more important as well. In Galgun Double Peace, there was a true love mode where you could basically romance any of the secondary characters in the game, all 80 of them. And in order to do that, you had to manipulate your stats. But to get through the main narrative routes, you didn't really have to worry about it all that much. In Galgun Returns, though, in order to get the true ending, to get the best affection rating from the heroines, you will need to manipulate your stats a bit. But again, on the interstitial screens between stages, it will indicate if your stats are in the right area by pulsing the bars on there to show that they're in the right area. So there's lots of like little subtle bits of helpful feedback in there that mean that it's not a chore to replay anyway, because it's only like an hour and a half to play through one heroine's route or something like that. But it doesn't continually frustrate you by making the objectives completely obscured, which is nice.
How do you manipulate your stats? What does that? What does that mean in terms of?
So,
like a rail shooter?
It takes a dating sim style approach. So, at the start of the game, the whole concept of Galgun, if you've not come across it before, is that your main character Tenzo he is targeted by this angel called Patako, who is, as her sort of graduation test for Angel Academy, she has to give a human a day in the sun, as she calls it, by shooting them with a Cupid's arrow, which gives them a day where they are more likely to find true love. But unfortunately, she fucks it up and shoots him with 16 of them at the same time, which makes him irresistible to women, apart from the people he might actually be interested in. And so he is also cursed by this, because humans are only supposed to have 3 days in the sun in their entire life, and he's basically got 16 in one day. So the concept is, if he doesn't find true love by the time the sun goes down, then he will be forever alone. And so in order to help him find true love, Patako interviews him to begin with to determine how smart he is, how athletic he is, how what's the other one? How stylish he is, and how lewd he is. So she asks you a bunch of questions that sort of say, how many porn mags have you got under your bed, and that sort of thing. And that determines your initial stats in intelligence, in style, in athletics, and in lewdness. So that's where you start the game. But as you go through the game, there's a mechanic called Doki Doki mode, where you charge it up as you successfully shoot girls. And you can set it off at any time by picking a girl and pressing a different button on them. And basically what happens there, if you successfully do this little mini game that involves pretty much staring at their tits and ass for a few minutes, they go off like a bomb, and they take out everyone who's near them. But the side effect of that is that it also manipulates your stats. Each girl that you use that mechanic on, they have a different effect on your stats. So like if you do it on the nerdy girl, she'll put your intelligence up but put your style down and that sort of thing. So you have to learn what effect each girl has on your stats so that you can manipulate them appropriately to get them in the right level for the different heroines. And that's one reason why you might want to collect their profiles, because once you have got their profile in full detail, you'll not only know a bit about the character, you will also know what effect they will have on your stats, so you can plan out things a little bit better. But then there's also things like if you do that on one of the teachers, they tend to have a universally positive effect on your stats, whereas the sort of random girls tend to put one up by quite a bit and another one down by quite a bit, which might not necessarily be desirable. So there's a certain amount of learning what girls will do what in order to succeed. So it takes a bit of experimentation there. But again, you get the helpful feedback as you play through the game that will let you do that. So that's where sort of a lot of the mechanical interest comes from.
Yeah, so they've really, really found a clever way to take the light gun style rail shooter and kind of address the age-old complaint that they have no replay value.
Yeah, absolutely. So besides the fact that each of the narrative routes has 3 possible endings depending on your actions, there is also the collecting of all these profiles. You need to basically collect each girl 3 times because they have 3 possible outfits. And then beyond that, there's like additional modes that you can play on top of there. There's a really fun score attack mode that sort of places a stronger emphasis on getting combos and that sort of thing. So yeah, there's a ton of replay value in this.
Cool. I want to play it.
Good stuff. All right. That's pretty much everything I've been playing for the minute. So should we take a break there and then we'll come back and talk about music?
Yes.
All right. Good stuff. All right. We'll see you in just a moment.
お嬢様。あの黒服怖いです。黒はやばいです。威圧されます。安心してください。こう見えても私は天使ですよ。
Welcome back for our third segment today. We thought we'd have a nice, sort of fairly breezy discussion about some of our favourite first level or first area or beginning of the game songs. So between us, we've got a whole bunch of different things to talk about from a variety of different genres and a variety of different time periods. So these are going to be in no particular order. These are just things that sort of came to mind as we were thinking about subject matter for this episode. So let's start with one that I put at the top of my list. Like I say, these are in no particular order. This is just the first one that happened to spring to mind. And that is the first level music from DoDonPachi Resurrection on iOS. And I say specifically iOS because it's the only version of this game that has this soundtrack in. For those of you who are familiar with DoDonPachi Resurrection, probably know that the series is quite well known for having a fairly moody, quite sinister soundtrack at times. But for some reason, in one of the game modes on the iOS version, they completely replaced the soundtrack with this incredibly cheerful piece of music. A whole selection of incredibly cheerful pieces of music, in fact, that were just... I found them a delight to listen to. They're a bit of an acquired taste for some people because they're very, very, very cheesy. But I've always really liked it. So the song in question that I'm talking about here is called Fly Above the Sky. And it's from the iOS-specific arrange mode of DoDonPachi Resurrection. So, I mean, hopefully you've had a chance to have a listen to this now. What do you have any particular thoughts about this one?
Well, so I think... I think it's a really good track, and I think it's really emblematic specifically of the way kind of shooters of its time were kind of starting to sound. Specifically, what's interesting is, I don't know what your history with like Cave and the DoDonPachi series is specifically.
DoDonPachi Resurrection on iPhone was my first ever bullet hell game, not just my first Cave game, but my first ever bullet hell game. Okay. And so I've obviously got a certain amount of personal attachment to this particular soundtrack for it because it was the first music I heard from this series and indeed this whole genre. So
okay. So what's interesting about the DonPachi series is that right now and like in its current phase, like DonPachi has kind of an anime feel.
Yeah.
That was not always the case. That came about much later. So, like, in the original DonPachi and DoDonPachi for the CPS2 arcade board and later ported to the Saturn, there were no cute anime girls.
Yeah.
And the music was, like, hard rock. Like synthesized hard rock. So it was really, I have experience with old DonPachi. I don't have experience with new anime-ified DonPachi. So like when I saw you had a track from a DoDonPachi game, I clicked on it, and it was like, oh, it's like cute anime girl carnival. But I'm used to like like electric guitars, and like that's the DoDonPachi I'm used to.
Like I say, this is the weird thing about this piece of music because they specifically composed this piece of music for the iOS version. The actual first level music for DoDonPachi Resurrection is very different. I'll just try and dig it up right now. Xbox 360 OST. And if you have a listen to this, it's completely different in style and tone. And I have no idea why they did it. I really like that they did it, but I have no idea why they did it.
Okay.
So I've just posted it in the chat now, but have a listen to this and compare to what you just heard.
Yeah, and that's very much more like typical shooter, right? It's got that bit of like slow build up and then like into the kind of hectic techno feel.
Yeah, and like you can picture how the start of that would go, wouldn't it? Like the start of it is your ship launching and it's got this sort of floaty ethereal music as your ship is coming out the mothership and that sort of thing.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. So that's interesting, but also still exceedingly different from what I associate with DoDonPachi. So, so I'll send you a track, and this is what I'm used to hearing from DoDonPachi. because I never played the like anime girls modern.
Oh god, wow,
DoDonPachi.
yeah.
And that's a very different feel
Yeah.
than either of the two tracks you sent me. Like to me, DoDonPachi, the second DonPachi game, is like the quintessential bullet hell soundtrack because I'm stressed just listening to this, and I'm not even I'm not even playing the game, which is of course the progenitor of the bullet hell genre. Like the first game to really have that Danmaku bullet curtain feel, where it was just insurmountable amounts of bullets. So I like this track, but it was such a surprise to me that it was coming from a DonPachi series game because I had no idea what to expect.
Yeah. It's just a piece of music whose very existence I find fascinating, and I actually found it quite disappointing when I picked up DoDonPachi Resurrection on Xbox 360, and there are some downloadable music packs, but this specific soundtrack is nowhere to be seen outside of the iOS version. They've never re-released it, and I don't really know why, but yeah, the only place you can hear that track in context is the iOS release of DoDonPachi Resurrection, which I don't even know if you can play on modern iOS devices. So I guess you had to be there.
Yeah, interesting. Now, does the game itself have like a bubblegumified presentation that matches that, or is just
no? But it does. It does have unique mechanics for the mode where you hear that music. So there is. It was an iOS specific mode where you. Where you had an S&M meter. Okay. I can't remember what S&M actually stood for, but it was basically if you shot things, if you sort of held down the fire button and shot things, then the meter would go in one direction and you get less points. Whereas if you stopped firing and picked stuff up, the meter would go in another direction, and all the collectibles would be worth more points. So you had to find a balance and try and keep this meter in the middle, so you got a good balance between generating collectibles and them being actually worth points. So it was a very, very different sort of mechanic to what DoDonPachi Resurrection's normal mechanic is, which is heavily combo based. But yeah, they developed whole new mechanics specifically for this version, as well as changing the soundtrack as well. So it's a really interesting and unique moment in Cave's history.
That's cool. And now that you explain that, it starts to make sense to me, because I don't know how much you know, I know you've educated yourself a bit on like the TurboGrafx era and the PC Engine, thanks to the episode we dedicated to your acquisition of the PC Engine Mini, but like part of like the early days of like shmups as a genre, specifically in the old 8-bit eras, was these caravan modes. Which were also sometimes called carnival modes, which were just modifications of games where score was everything. It was literally just like a shortened period of competitive score with occasionally new mechanical wrinkles thrown in to encourage score chasing. So when you think about it in the context of a carnival mode, it's kind of makes sense that there's this upbeat, celebratory tone to this music in a mode that's focusing on unique scoring mechanics and score chasing in a unique and new way.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Perfect sense. All right, well, that was my first one. So I thought we'd start with an interesting one that generated a nice amount of discussion. Where do you want to begin with your picks?
We'll start off with the first one on my list, the level 1 theme from Natsume's Shadow of the Ninja.
Yep. This is not a game I'm super familiar with, but yeah, I'm sort of vaguely familiar with it in passing, but I don't think it's one I've played myself. Is this one you played back in the day?
Yes, this was, as a kid, probably second only to Castlevania in terms of being absolutely obsessed.
Yeah.
now I've come to understand as an adult that this game actually has a bit of a cult following, to the point where Limited Run, I believe they've just closed pre-orders on it, but last month Limited Run actually did a cartridge reprint of it with like special artwork, and it's part of kind of this series of side-scrollers that Natsume was kind of famous for back in the 8-bit Nintendo era. And there was a couple of them. Another one being Shatterhand that they were quite famous for.
Yep.
And they had this very specific look and feel and sound. I mean, I think some people consider Shadow of the Ninja a ripoff of Ninja Gaiden, but that's not really accurate. And the two series actually intersect in interesting ways. Like, a really cool piece of trivia is the Ninja Gaiden game on the Game Boy is actually Shadow of the Ninja's Game Boy version. And it was developed by it was developed by Natsume, not Tecmo, and it was brought over as Ninja Gaiden. So there's some intersection of mechanics in between the two games. You're a ninja, you can cling to walls. But where Shadow of the Ninja deviate quite a bit from Ninja Gaiden, which had more of like a modern day setting and like kind of like monsters and like bio stuff. Shadow of the Ninja is more like taking place in this weird like techno organic future. So you're fighting like cool robots and like giant tanks, and like the final boss of the game has these like massive like mecha dragons that like shoot at you. But I guess the big thing here is the music. So the music here is composed by oh boy, what's his name? Hiroyuki Iwatsuki, who worked with Natsume forever. Still does work with Natsume. And what's interesting about this soundtrack is, I don't know about you, but like I have certain expectations about soundscapes when ninjas are involved. And what's cool about Shadow of the Ninja is it kind of hits the nail on the head for me in a lot of ways, because it has these opening tones with kind of a build-up, and it very much captures the feeling of infiltration.
Yes, yeah.
Like secret agent infiltration. Like you're a ninja. The game actually follows a very specific infiltration structure when you play. When you break the levels down one by one. So like level 1, where you hear this music, is very specifically this dramatic setting where you're on a ship. The ship brings you in. The ship is bringing you in to the dock, and it's a pouring rain. So this is the music that's playing while you're fighting on this ship in the pouring rain to get to the city that's being overrun by this dictator. And then the second, like level 1, 2, is the dock. All right, then you play on the dock. And then you fight the boss. Then the level 2, 1 is the sewers, as you're going down in the sewers to infiltrate the city. Then it's a factory, and then eventually you work your way to the headquarters, which is a skyscraper and has like an elevator sequence. Like the game actually uses its level design to tell a very like A to B narrative. So this track specifically does a really good job of just like setting that narrative up wordlessly. Like, this is the infiltration mission. You are the last hope of the people in this city who are oppressed by this guy. And it does this really great job of like starting off with this like secret agent, and then it builds to this like really triumphant like crescendo, just like celebrating the ninja. Like it's just like this track is so good.
There's a comment on the YouTube video of this soundtrack that I really like, that I think sums it up nicely, which is this is attributed to Johnny Norris Jr. from 9 months ago, and he says, "There's just something about this that sets it apart from Ninja Turtles, Ninja Gaiden, or Revenge of Shinobi. Those themes are personal, they are dire, desperate, the sound of danger. This, on the other hand, sounds like two professionals going to work."
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah, and it's there's a lot of things that are contributing to that. A lot of it is all to do with that driving rhythm in the background. There's this sort of constant and quite complex rhythm patterns going on in the drums of this that sort of give it that real push forwards. But yeah, this is exactly the sort of first level music that I really like, and there's a lot of NES games that do this really well. This is sort of a very iconic sounding NES piece of music.
I mean, there's a theory I have, which I think we've discussed prior in like building up to this episode over the months where we discussed doing like a level 1 music episode. But like, I have an unofficial theory that the first level music of a game is that game's theme.
Yeah.
Like,
do
you know what I mean? Like, the first level music of a game should tell you everything you need to know about that game's like tone and setting. And like, that's that game's theme. And I always associate that first level music with the game specifically. Like, they're always intrinsically tied into my head. Yeah.
That's something that I'm not sure it's as true today as it used to be, but certainly up until about sort of the 1632-bit era or so, that was definitely very much the case.
Well, when levels were a thing.
Yeah, exactly. With sort of the shift towards more sort of open games and more cinematic structures and that sort of thing, the way that soundtracks work is very different in a lot of games these days. But yeah, I mean, I've got a couple of RPGs on my list as well where that's still valid as well, where you can think of it as that game's theme.
Yeah, and I had to fight hard to whittle it down to 10. Like, I hope this will have to be a theme we kind of return to annually or something.
Oh yeah, definitely.
There's so many, and as I was going through, I mean, I have in my iTunes specifically a playlist that's just first area game music playlist.
Oh, good. I do as well. I have first level music and I have final boss music as playlists.
Yeah. Those are mine too. I have boss music, final boss music, first area game music, and RPG battle tunes. But first area game music is 145 tracks. Yeah, it's just the first level of every game I happen to have the soundtrack for. Because to me, nothing is more evocative of that game than its first level music. So I really hope we can come back to this, because it's every track on that 145 track playlist I can talk about for a different reason, for the different feelings it evokes, the different ways it communicates that game's personality. Like, it's so important.
Yeah. I am 100% the same. I love talking about game music, and we should do it more often. So, yeah, let's make an effort to do that a bit more often. Okay, the next one I want to bring up ties in very nicely with what you've just said as well. And the one I want to bring up next is the first level music from the shareware version of Rise of the Triad. And I say specifically the shareware version because Rise of the Triad was unusual among shareware games in that the shareware version was completely different to the full version. Most shareware games of the period would give you like an episodic structure where you would get the shareware version as one episode, and then when you registered it and paid the price for it, you would get episodes 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Rise of the Triad, on the other hand, made a completely different game for its shareware version, and then when you bought the full version, you got a game where you didn't have to play through the same 10 levels again. You just got straight into something new. However, the one thing that disappointed me slightly about the full version of Rise of the Triad was that the first level music was not anywhere near as good as the first level music in the shareware version.
This track is amazing.
Do you know who
composed this?
It's a guy called Lee Jackson. I think he did quite a lot of stuff for... In fact, he's the first comment on the YouTube video I sent you. Lee Jackson. He did quite a lot of stuff for Apogee at the time. This piece of music really hit me hard for a lot of reasons. It's exactly the sort of kind of energetic, dramatic music that I expect from a first level. It actually inspired me to try and recreate some of these sounds in my own experimentation with music technology at the time as well. Because I think around the time Rise of the Triad came out, I would have been doing either GCSE or A-level music at school. And part of your studies there is doing some composition. And so as part of experimenting with different styles of music and that sort of thing, I took a lot of inspiration from the games I was playing and the soundtracks I was listening to. And this was one that had a huge impact on me. Things like the use of the sort of twangy bass sound at the bottom and the square wave synth and the energetic drum beats in the background and so on. This is absolutely one of the finest pieces of music from PC gaming of the era.
I mean this as a compliment. When I never played this game, neither the shareware nor the regular version. I have almost zero experience, especially with older PC gaming. But I was legitimately surprised this was not from a Japanese game.
Yeah.
This sounds like a shmup track.
Yeah. Rise of the Triad soundtrack as a whole is really, really good. And it's a doubly impressive achievement when you consider that at the time this came out, there was no consistency in what a PC game sounded like, because some people had an ad-lib sound card, which sounded a bit like sort of Mega Drive FM synthesis. Some people had a wavetable card, which sounded a bit more like what the Super NES offered. And so when Lee Jackson was composing this, he had to bear all of those things in mind and think that, okay, is this going to sound good on FM synthesis? Is this going to sound good on wavetable synthesis? Is this going to sound good on all these different possible setups? And he nailed it. This sounds as great on a Sound Blaster Pro as it does on a Gravis Ultrasound. I don't know if any of that means anything to you, but old school PC gamers will know what I'm talking about. And they will know what an achievement that is as well. But yeah, Rise of the Triad soundtrack in general is really good. A lot of it is very energetic like this, but then every few levels it will present you with something that is sort of a bit more down-tempo, that sort of kind of... It's not downtime as such, because you're still racing around at high speed shooting things, but just the change in tone of the music just kind of gives you a moment to catch your breath a bit before things get hectic again. Rise of the Triad also has an amazing boss theme as well that I'll share with you right now, if I can find it. Boss theme. Is it this one? Yes, here we are. This is another one that I found incredibly striking when I first heard it, just because of its mostly through to its use of percussion in this one. This was a very sort of almost cinematic style piece of music. As you say, you don't know much about Rise of the Triad. It was originally intended to be a sequel to Wolfenstein 3D. And tracks like this are where that is most apparent, I think, because you've got this very sort of march-like rhythm in the background.
Yeah, it's military in tone.
Yeah.
But this is like storming the beaches of Normandy. Yeah. Time to take the base down.
Yeah. But this music tends to be accompanied by you are fighting some sort of... Rise of the Triad is really weird because it's got this blend of like people in World War I uniforms and then like ridiculous fantasy and mech stuff as well. So like when you hear this piece of music, you are probably fighting some sort of giant robot that has an evil dictator inside it.
Sure. Which follows suit with Wolfenstein.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah,
but yeah,
sure.
that is definitely one of my favourites. And in fact, going down the fast way, which is the one that I first showed you there, that is probably one of the main reasons I wanted to talk about this subject in the first place.
I just can't imagine this track in a first-person shooter.
Yeah.
Like, I can't wrap my head around it.
Yeah.
What that would feel like. Because I'm used to first-person shooters having either, like, no music or, like, kind of down-tempo music or, like, rock or, like, military. Like, I can't imagine this, like, synthy business.
Yeah. Well... You know when people talk about how they prefer the feel of 90s shooters and they prefer that 90s shooters are sort of high speed and that sort of thing. Rise of the Triad, although technologically a bit more primitive than stuff like Doom, is probably the best example of the ridiculous 90s shooter, because it is incredibly fast. There is a heavy emphasis on using rocket launchers. There is sort of some light platforming. There is collecting sparkly things to get extra lives and stuff. So it's not like a modern first-person shooter where it's trying to immerse you in the environment. Rise of the Triad fucking loves the fact that it is a video game, and it doesn't let you forget that at any point.
Lovely. It sounds great. I mean, you know me. I'm not opposed to first-person shooters.
Uh-huh.
You know, I have I have a physical copy of Ion Fury on pre-order. Like, I'm not opposed, especially this older style. But yeah, I like this. I like when they have a bit of an arcadey feel. I like stuff like Serious Sam and you know, we had mentioned Dark Watch a little while ago. And of course, you know, we always talk about the modern reboots of Shadow Warrior on here.
Yeah, yeah.
I love that stuff. Just I don't like shooty military mans.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Rise of the Triad is about as far from that as you can get. So, if you get the opportunity to check it out, that's well worth doing. The reboot they did a few years back was very true to the original as well. Actually, it included sort of modern remixes of a lot of these pieces of music that Lee Jackson originally composed.
They must have known.
Yeah, exactly. They knew exactly what they were doing. So, yeah, worth checking out. Cool. All right, what is next on your list?
Super Castlevania 4. Now, I promised myself I would only include one Castlevania track today, because this could have just been 10 Castlevania tracks, but just Super Castlevania 4's level 1 music, the theme of Simon, which it doesn't get more epic than that, the theme of the most famous vampire hunter in Castlevania, Simon Belmont, is one of the more iconic tracks of Castlevania history. Up there with Bloody Tears and Vampire Killer.
Yep.
Now, I didn't include Vampire Killer today, which is kind of the most iconic Castlevania track, right? That's the level 1 of Castlevania 1 theme song. Super iconic. But I wanted to talk about the theme of Simon for a couple of reasons. Composed by Taro Kudo and Masanori Adachi. You know, Castlevania music is always the best of the best. But very few tracks when I was young utterly blew me away and gave me the goosebumps in the same way that Theme of Simon does. And there's a reason for a lot of that. And some of it ties back to some of the same design elements I was talking about in regards to Shadow of the Ninja. One of the things I love about old side-scrollers from this 8 and 16-bit era is when they did do that wordless, textless narrative and world-building simply through stage design. And the opening moments of Castlevania 4 are a masterclass in this, right? So you start very specifically in this desolate realm outside of Dracula's castle. There's some music playing. It's very ambient tones, just coming in and out gently as you kind of walk up and down these steps, collect a couple power-ups, then the drawbridge to the castle drops, and you enter the castle proper, and that's when it all happens, right?
Yeah.
This giant wrought iron gate, hauntedly, just comes out of the ground, thunderously shaking, covered in vines and ivy, and then bam! These synth organs on the Nintendo soundboard start blaring in. It's just the classic, Bela Lugosi, Dracula horror organ style sound you expect. But then it also becomes rock and roll. Castlevania has always, even in the early 8-bit days of 1 through 3, has always flirted with like rock-inspired sounds and chord progressions.
Yeah.
But the technology of the Super Nintendo's soundboard allowed them to do that in a way that was a lot more overt.
Yeah.
Or these organ sounds actually kind of sound like organ sounds. The more layers of drum and bass. Super Nintendo specifically always did a really good job with deep bass tones.
Yes.
And I don't know music or sound techs. Like, you might know the terminology better than I do, but there's just a very specific sound to that Super Nintendo, like, on like the vibration of it.
Yeah.
And the composers of the Castlevania series, in many interviews, often talk very specifically about being inspired by 60s and 70s English prog rock. Bands like Yes, King Crimson, Triumvirate, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Gentle Giant. And a lot of those bands were very famous for often incorporating electric organ into their music. So in a lot of ways, this tune feels like this triumphant, hard-tinged Japanese progressive rock on the 16-bit, celebrating the heroism of Simon Belmont, but also giving you that flavor of horror and spooky Castlevania theme. It's just everything.
Yeah.
It's just
absolutely.
everything.
Yeah. I mean, I like... Super Castlevania 4 isn't my favourite Castlevania soundtrack by any means, but...
Mine either, but this track is.
One thing that I do particularly like about it is that it is an incredibly iconic example of what the Super NES sounds like.
Yes.
If someone says, what did the Super NES music sound like, I would play them this track, because it does everything that a good Super NES track should do. It's got those digital drums, it's got the organs, it's got the twangy bass lines, it's got that sort of thing. Super NES had a really distinctive sound that you mentioned there, because of the way it synthesized sound. So the Mega Drive and Genesis used FM synthesis, which is basically generating waveforms on the fly that were designed to resemble particular instruments. So it's a bit like how the NES worked, but the NES was much more limited in the range of waveforms that it could produce. Whereas FM had a lot more flexibility, but it was still effectively generating sounds from scratch. Which meant that they often didn't end up sounding quite like what they were supposed to. Now, oddly enough, I don't know the science behind it, but apparently an organ is very easy to synthesize with FM synthesis, which is why in certain Mega Drive and Genesis tracks, you will get really convincing organ sounds, but then everything else might sound a bit tinny or whatever. The Super NES works a little bit differently. It worked with a system called wavetable synthesis, which is, instead of generating the waveforms for the different instruments on the fly, it would take something that was pre-generated, often an actual sample of a particular instrument, and then it would do things like it would pitch shift that, it would apply effects to it, it would apply reverb and echo and delay and stuff to it to create those distinctive sounds. So you might be familiar with sort of a lot of Super NES pieces of music. They have very similar sort of, if we take an example of this track here, the trumpet sound you hear in this piece of music, you will also hear in other places. You'll hear it in things like the Zelda theme. You'll hear it in, you'll even hear it in like Mario games and that sort of thing. That's because the Super NES was working with this very almost sort of predefined bank of instruments. It was a very large bank of instruments, but it was still a predefined bank of instruments, which basically meant that the Super NES had a much more specific sound to it than a lot of other consoles at the time. And that's one of the things I really like about the Super NES in terms of sound of music. You can instantly recognize the Super NES piece of music,
yes,
from the sounds that are being used, and this piece of music is a great example of that because it's using most of them.
yeah, it's very cool. And you're right about Castlevania 4 not being an example of one of the stronger Castlevania soundtracks, specifically I think to me because most of the music in Castlevania 4, especially in the middle stages, is mostly just kind of ambient.
Yes, that's exactly why I don't think... It's not that I don't like it, it's just that in Castlevania I prefer a bit more obvious sort of melody to it. Like, yes, I really like Michiru Yamane's work because every track that Michiru Yamane does for Castlevania is incredibly memorable. in terms of the tune. Like you could sing any song from Symphony of the Night because it's got a clear tune to it, whereas Castlevania 4 takes a much more atmospheric approach in its middle stages, as you say, which works in context, but it's not necessarily something that I would want to listen to as much outside of the game itself.
Yeah, it's particularly disappointing because of the strength of this opening level track.
Yeah.
And then it all loops back then later, though. In the end stages, it brings back Super Nintendo-ified remixes of the classics. Like the last levels have Bloody Tears, Vampire Killer, for the first time with the Super Nintendo sound.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. But like those middle chunk of stages, it's mostly ambient, like gentle stuff. So it has a very different flavor than the rest of the series.
In context, though, I can see that working brilliantly because can you imagine, like, for the first time, you're familiar with the NES Castlevania, and then you play through Super Castlevania for the first time, and you get to these later stages, and those themes that you're so familiar with from the previous games suddenly come back. Can you imagine how good that would feel?
I know how good it felt.
I'm sure you do, yeah.
I was there. It was amazing.
Yeah.
It was absolutely amazing. It felt the same way as, I don't know, have you ever watched the animated series?
I still haven't, no. I must do that.
So the Castlevania animated series has no Castlevania music in it.
Yeah.
It's all just original music, except for the second last episode, when Trevor, Sypha, and Alucard finally break into the castle. And then there's a massive showdown with all of Dracula's vampire generals, and it's one of the best animated sequences I've ever seen in my life. Like, just like everything's on full display, like the magic and Alucard's transformations, and it's just the orchestration of the action so that everything falls together like a puzzle. It's beautiful and brilliant. But what makes this one of the best scenes in all animation history is, as soon as they kick the door open of the castle, Bloody Tears comes in.
Ah, wonderful.
And it is the only time there's Castlevania music in the Castlevania animated series.
Yeah.
Is for that fight. And it's the reward.
Yeah.
Just, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. I'll probably have to go watch that sequence again. And the only reason I've never sent you that clip is because I feel like you have to earn it. And you have to watch season 1 and 2 and earn it. But yeah, I mean, music in Castlevania, and we'll come back to it, but this track, Theme of Simon, in particular, kind of encapsulates everything to me that's wonderful about Castlevania music. The rock influence, the horror influence, the narrative world building tied to the stage design. It's just a masterclass.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. All right, staying with the Gothic theme then, I want to go on to the Deathsmiles soundtrack and the first level of Deathsmiles, which is Burning Halloween Town. This is one of my favourite tracks from Shoot 'em Ups, just because on the one hand, I mean, it's got this wonderful gothic feel to it, but it's also got that distinctive, I guess it's veering on that sort of anime side of things like you were talking about again. So like you've got this incredibly dramatic organ heavy opening with like ominous chanting in the background, and then it goes into like sort of synth piano and like driving drum rhythms and that sort of thing. I love this track so much. It's so good.
Yeah. It's lovely. We've talked about this a lot before, specifically a couple years back when we did a Halloween-themed episode where we very specifically wanted to talk about games that were not horror games, but had a spooky Halloween-appropriate theme. So, like, stuff like this that has, like, ooh, it's cheeky, it's horror, here comes the organ. Like, I can't get enough of this shit. jack-o'-lanterns and skulls and crows and bats. Like that is perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect Halloween game music.
Yeah. Deathsmiles is... Yeah, I mean, the whole game is like that. The whole game is a very tongue-in-cheek approach to horror. So, like, you sort of fly through your graveyards and there's, like, skeletons coming out of the ground and stuff, but it's... The whole thing, just the atmosphere is like, it's very like, woo, spooky, scary skeletons and that sort of thing. Like, and then it combines that with stuff like, there's like a boss that's a giant cow, and...
I mean, you're talking to a guy who has to date in the past month invested about 80 hours of his life making a giant painting of a pyro jack from Shin Megami Tensei. Yep. So like you don't have to sell spooky scary skeletons to me. It's my jam.
Yeah. It's wonderful, and just like I say, this just sort of hits all of the perfect notes for me in terms of a first level track. It's energetic, it's got a clear tune to it. It's something that you look forward to hearing again when you start that game over for the umpteenth time. Because it's a shoot 'em up, you play it lots of times. You will hear this piece of music probably more than anything else in the game, depending on how you choose to play shoot 'em ups. And it's an absolute pleasure to hear it every time it comes up.
Yeah, I regrettably have never played any of the games in this series, which is something I have to rectify that immediately so that I can meet my Lord and Savior Tyranno Satan.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, what's next on your list?
We have got... Oh, we got a good one. The first theme from the first Ys. The first steps towards wars. Specifically for me, the PC Engine CD version, as I have no experience with the original PC and the PC 98 or whatever PC platform Ys was originally launched on. I don't have experience with those versions. But, you know, hey, I'll talk about Ys some more today.
Yay!
So, you know, this track, first of all, Yuzo Koshiro, right? Like, the legend. This was one of his earlier tracks, and one of the earliest tracks that he kind of gained a lot of notoriety for was his early work with Falcom. Before he founded Ancient, before he did Streets of Rage. Like, this was early him when he did this working with Falcom. And much like many of the tracks I'll discuss, it perfectly communicates the themes of the game wordlessly, right? This song sounds like so many things, and very specifically, it sounds like the thrill of adventure, right?
Yes.
Like, the whole narrative of Ys is kind of loose, and like the games kind of tie together, but not episodically in such a way that you can play them out of sequence and be bothered by it. But one thing that connects all Ys games is that Adol Kristen is an adventurer.
Yep.
He doesn't speak. He doesn't have a personality. He's defined entirely by his love of adventure and his desire to explore and to see the world, to help people when he can. And this track is that. It's the quintessential, I'm setting out on an adventure, thrill of the unknown. Before things get too daunting, before things get too scary, before things get too heavy, this is the theme of setting out with confidence and looking toward new horizons. And besides that, it even mechanically harkens back to everything that Ys is all about, which is that quicker pacing, that sense of action. Even the first Ys games where you didn't even have an attack button and you basically had to run into foes just by like running into them to damage them. My buddies and I used to call it the football RPG. It's a deliberate evocation of that this is no deliberate Zelda title. This is no slowly paced puzzle solving overhead RPG. This is an action game with that overhead setting, and just First Steps Towards War communicates all that brilliantly and succinctly. It's just and I remember too, like they even reused a lot of the music in the anime. So like there's this great scene where like this base is getting marauded by monsters, and like Adel's storming in from the outside. He takes all the monsters out that are storming the castle, like from the outside of the castle, and this is playing on like electric guitars wailing, and it's just like like this to me has always just been Adel's theme. I mean, there's been like Adel's themes and like other Ys games down the years, but like, to me this theme communicates everything Adel is all about, just like the strength of the mighty adventurer.
You mentioned specifically the PC Engine version there. What do you think of the Chronicles version?
Is that the DS one?
The Chronicles one is the PSP and PC one.
I actually never played that version.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So the PC version of Chronicles, certainly. I don't know about the PSP one, but the PC version actually allows you to switch between 3 different versions of the soundtrack. So you've got this modern remix. You've got the PC Engine version, and you've got the original PC 88 soundtrack as well, so you can play it with all 3 of them.
That's neat.
This was my first experience with Ys 1, was the Chronicle soundtrack, and although it's a little bit different to the PC Engine version, I really like this version because it's got those wailing guitars and that sort of thing, and I think they fit really well with this track. There's a certain hint of Muso to this one, I think, with the specific guitar sound that they're using. Just this sort of tuneful melodic guitar is very Muso. It's not quite as energetic as some of the Muso tracks. It's got a different sort of overall feel to it, but the actual sort of timbre of the sound is very similar to.
This is the version from the anime.
Oh right, okay. So they use the same one. That's cool.
Yeah, that's the version from the anime. Yeah, great. It's great. Yeah, I never played Chronicles. I know I should. I know it's a particularly well-regarded version, but they're just reached a point in my life when that game came out. I wasn't doing too well financially when that game came out, so I had to be more picky and choosy about what I bought. And I was like, if I have to rebuy Ys 1 and 2 one more time, PC.
You mean you don't already have it for PC 88, PC Engine, Master System?
Yeah, exactly. I had the PC Engine version. I had the DS version, which is kind of controversial. Yeah. I had owned and played at one point the import PSP remakes that they did. Like, I was just like, I don't need to storm the Tower of Dharm ever again, ever. So I just. Time has softened my opinion on that.
I was going to say, give it a few years, and you think, I really fancy storming the Tower of Dharm again, and then you can do that in Ys 1, and then you can do it in Ys Origin all over again. So. Yeah,
I want to buy it specifically because, of course, the good folks at Xseed did this beautiful thing where if you get Ys 7, Ys Oath and Felghana, and Chronicles 1 and 2, the spines all make the Ys logo.
Oh, really? Oh, that's awesome.
I don't know if they did that in your region. Well, no, they didn't.
I don't think they got physical releases at all over here.
Yeah, so if you buy
my sole experience with that particular generation of Ys games is all on the PC versions that are on Steam.
Yeah. So the spines of each of those has a segment of the Ys logo. Oh, so if you buy all 3 of them, you have a big orange Ys on your shelf.
This is revenge for the Final Fantasy XIV thing, isn't it?
Mayhaps. But yeah, PSP's region free, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. It's just a case of tracking down copies of them and importing them. But
so I have 7.
All right, I'll look into it.
I have 7. I have Oath and Felghana, but I don't have Chronicles 1 and 2. So I got the Y, but I don't got the S.
Oh, disappointing.
So it's a cool looking set together.
Yeah.
Yeah, get out there, buy them UMDs in 2021. No, I'm re-falling in love with the PSP. I want to buy.
I love the PSP. Yeah. The only thing I wish was a bit better about the PSP is TV output for taking screenshots and video, because I've got one of those AV cables, but the the quality of the output is such ass that I can't really use anything from it, which is a shame. But
Well,
I believe there are HDMI converters that exist. I haven't looked into those yet, but I think Metal Jesus covered one of those a while back.
Yep.
So I might have to look into those.
Yep, I was just about to say Hyperkin's got an HDMI output cable for it that you can buy. It's about $30. And if you pair that with I don't remember the name of the company. It's like M something. They have a thing that's called the Classics, and it's just a little dongle that's an upscaler. Now that's about $100, but if you pair one of those HDMI output sets with that $100 Classics upscaler, you can get some really impressive effects out of it. And like that's on my list of like shit to buy, so I can revisit some of the goofy stuff of the PSP era. But that's an episode in itself. Weird PSP RPGs.
Yes, definitely
is an episode in and of itself.
Definitely. All right, moving on. Next one on my list then actually has quite a similar feel to that Ease track, which is the first level music from Blaster Master Zero.
Yeah,
it's actually the same music from the beginning of the original Blaster Master, but sort of integrated with their enhanced retro sound. In fact, one of the first comments on the YouTube video I sent you is, "This is how the NES version sounded in my head as a kid."
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
But yeah,
that's
again, in fact, in terms of sort of melodic structure, this piece of music is actually very similar to the one we just listened to. It's got a very similar sort of style of melody and the harmonies in the background, and again, you've got those driving rhythms that make you want to sort of push onwards and do that sort of thing. That's quite a common pattern in a lot of these tracks that we're listening to. They've all got this very energetic, high-speed, complex rhythm section, and that's a big part of what gives you that initial burst of energy that you need to push onwards in particularly in an action game. And Blaster Master Zero does that absolutely perfectly, I think. It's just a wonderful theme. It's a memorable tune, and it sets the mood perfectly. It fits perfectly with what is going on screen, because you're this sort of weird little bouncy tank thing, and you're hopping around and you're blasting things that look oddly cheerful despite the fact they're trying to kill you. And yeah, it's a pleasure. You're off on an adventure, and this is your theme.
Yeah, just like I was saying with East, it's like you are a young man setting off into the unknown. The thrill of the unknown is in front of you. You're not afraid of it. You're ready to face it. This is what that sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And again, like I say, this is based specifically on the original NES version of Blaster Master, but a lot of Inti Creates games follow this same sort of formula with their initial soundtracks. So like if you play the first level, Mighty Gunvolt Burst, again, that's got a very similar feel to this. The beginning of the Gunvolt games, it's a bit more sort of moody and atmospheric, but it's still got that energy to it. It's still got that feeling that you're setting out on some sort of grand adventure and that you're ready for it. It's not something you're reluctant to do, it's something you want to do.
Yeah, it's great. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great.
Cool.
I mean, I always loved that theme. I always loved the NES version. I had I had Blaster Master growing up.
Yeah.
I hated the game, but I liked that music. It was way too hard for me to figure out when I was a kid. But I used to love that track.
Yeah. I mean, as someone who didn't really grow up with the NES that much, Blaster Master was pretty much new to me when I came across Blaster Master Zero for the first time. So it was a real pleasure to discover. But yeah, I can absolutely hear that would fit in perfectly with NES soundtracks at the time, albeit in a slightly simplified form over what the version in Zero is, but it would still have the same effect. It would still sound like that, basically.
Yeah.
All right, what's next for you?
All right, we're talking Bayard first day. We're doing Burning Force.
Yes, one of the most memorable themes in this list today, I think.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. There's There's nothing. There's zero flaws with Bayard First Day. Composed by Yoshinori Kawamoto. I specifically have memories associated with the Mega Drive version. I never played the original. I never played the arcade original until years later on MAME.
Yeah.
So like the Mega Drive version, which you can also hear on the Evercade Namco Collection number 2 cart, which is great, is just lovely. So like the whole premise of Burning Force from a narrative standpoint is that you are a young cadet in a piloting simulator learning the ropes on this high-tech hover bike. And there's just something about the way this track sounds, like with its little like bleeps and bloops, that communicates like tutorial to me. Like, let's learn how to use a computer. Bloop, bloop, bloop.
Yeah.
Bloop, 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 bloop. Like, and then, so it's that, like, let's learn how to use a computer, kids, like, sound, paired with this absolute, unmistakable, sunny, upbeat 1980s sound. Like, Miami Vice, like, you're on the beach, baby, let's fly over the water, which is exactly what's happening in the first level of Burning Force. It's just 1989, the end of the 80s, this pleasant vaporwave synth feel, and it's just, it's bright, and it's sunny, and it's techno, and it's just, oh god, I love this track so much.
Yeah, oh, it's great. It's great. And it's also got that iconic Mega Drive sound about it as well.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm looking through the comments on the YouTube video of this, and a fair few people saying that they actually prefer the Mega Drive sound to the original arcade version.
I do, but I don't know if that's just nostalgia or I genuinely like the sound better. I don't have an unbiased opinion on that.
They are different, because I mean there are sort of similar synth noises in both, but there's a big difference again in the percussion sound of things as well, because the Mega Drive could do sampled drums, but for the most part it used synthesized drums, and that gives it a very distinctive sound to it.
Yeah,
and you've got a lot of that in the Burning Force music. You've got that distinct. This sounds like a Mega Drive game, basically.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And yeah. So yeah, what I was talking about with the distinctive way the Super NES sounds, this sounds like a Mega Drive game. This is what the Mega Drive sounds like.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It has that like whiny sound that I think was the Genesis trying to do a guitar. Like I don't.
Yeah. That is absolutely that is absolutely the closest that FM synthesis can get to an electric guitar, and it was like a running joke amongst musicians for a long time. It was like, just don't use that sound.
Oh no, always use that sound. Use that sound for minutes. It's my favorite. I was a Genesis kid. I didn't have a Super Nintendo till I was an adult. So like FM to me is my youth. You know, continuing this theme we're having of reading user comments, there's a fella down here going by the name Darkbone every morning back in the 90s. like yes. When I was, I don't know, early 20s, and like cell phones first had the ability to have MP3s set as ringtones, this was my alarm.
Yep.
This was my wake-up alarm. Because it's very much like, get up, start the day.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I can see that working. I can see that working very well. I've actually got 2 pieces from Atelier Lulu are waking me up at the moment, but I might have to replace them with this and see if that works a bit better. Because it's like Italian music is all like very nice. It's like, oh, you should probably get up. It's a nice day, but you know, if you feel like staying in bed, it's probably all right. Whereas this is get up.
But not an unpleasant get up. It's not like get up, fuck you. It's get up, you can do this.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Absolutely love it.
Like, don't set that DoDonPachi track I sent you earlier. Oh my god, what's going on? Is my house on fire? Like, don't do that.
Oh dear. Yeah. All right. Continuing on, what have we got next? Eschatos. Eschatos, one of my favorite shoot 'em ups of all time, and one of my favorite shoot 'em up soundtracks of all time as well.
This track is
There's
good.
actually several different mixes of the Eschatos soundtrack. The one I sent you is like the original mix, I think, rather than the arranged version.
Sure.
I really like this soundtrack because it's got a very distinctive feel to it. It's the game itself is from an era well beyond platforms having specific sound chips in them, but they've deliberately gone for certain aspects of FM synthesis in this soundtrack. So there are parts of the Eschatos soundtrack as a whole that deliberately sound like something you would have on a Mega Drive, but it's got an overall sort of thicker and fuller texture to it. There's more stuff going on at the same time. There's a kind of richer sound to the whole thing. So it's kind of a balance between a very retro feel in some of the specific sounds that are being used, but the overall, I guess richness is the best word. It's a complex composition with a lot going on that is satisfying to listen to. You listen to this and it's got this lovely full sound and you think, yes. And again, it's got a lot of the same things that we've talked about on many of these tracks. We've got that driving rhythm pushing you forwards. We've got this lovely sort of bendy sound right at the beginning that is sort of, this is the beginning of a shoot 'em up now.
Yeah, fire up your engines.
Yeah, and it's just pushing you onwards to doing great things. It's inspiring you to do your best. It's got this triumphant, memorable melody line over the top. It's got sort of counter melodies complementing each other, like a sort of conversation between you going, yes, I can do this, and someone going, you can do this. And yeah, it really fits perfectly with the first level of Eschatos as well, which is sort of you being launched over this city to fend off this alien invasion single-handedly, basically. So it's got this sort of aspect of imagining people looking up at the sky of you flying over the top of them and shooting down these massive flying saucers and that sort of thing. And Eschatos generally as a whole is a beautifully choreographed shoot 'em up, not just in terms of music but in terms of the way it uses camera angles and all sorts of things like that. I think in a previous episode at some point I talked about the blasting into space sequence in the second level of this. I don't know if you remember that conversation.
Yes.
But yeah. But there is a sequence in Eschatos where you're sort of fighting around this sort of Aztec-style pyramid, and you're sort of taking out all these gun turrets and so on. And when you finish that sequence, you just do this incredibly dramatic swoop towards the pyramid, and then you fire your rocket boosters and you're flying off into space, and it's just one of the best moments in any game ever.
If you really like this sound profile, I would definitely encourage you to check out some more like Saturn era stuff. There's a very specific sound to Saturn era shmup soundtracks. Specifically, like I'm thinking back to like the companies I really like, Rising / Aiding and their output. Back in the Saturn day, you had a very specific dichotomy. You had soundtracks that had two very different sound profiles. You had games that were made specifically for the Saturn on like higher tech, and those had a CD. Those had CD sound, so it was pretty much limitless in terms of what the music could actually sound like. But many Saturn games were arcade games on the CPS2 arcade board, which had a sound board, so it couldn't quite have CD sound. So this sounds so much like early Saturn era arcade port soundtracks. Yeah. Like it's, oh god, do I love it.
Ah, beautiful. Okay, so what's next on your list then?
All right, let's take a look. Next, I have Conquest of the Crystal Palace.
Not a game I'm familiar with, but I have vague memories of you raving about this game on a previous episode of this podcast, so I am familiar with it.
Yeah, I love this game. This was one of those games. I don't know what the situation was in the UK. Did you have like game rentals and stuff the same way we did in the States?
We did, but I don't know. as I've said several times, I didn't really get sort of big into console gaming until sort of the PlayStation era, really. I had a Super NES, but I didn't have that many games for it, and I didn't get super into collecting games and buying games until the PS1 era. You could definitely rent PS1 games, but I'm not sure about anything before that.
Okay. So there's a very classic story, especially for like kids like American kids my age, growing up in the era of like Blockbuster Video, wherein there's like the White Whale game. Yeah. The game that you loved, that you rented over and over and over again. Probably rented it enough to buy it, but your parents could never find it in stores, so you never got to own it. Right? So there was this copy of Conquest of the Crystal Palace at Suncoast Video, a little privately owned video store down the street from me. And I would rent Conquest of the Crystal Palace like on rotation. I would like rent a game, then I would rent Conquest of the Crystal Palace. Then I would rent a game, then I would rent Conquest of the Crystal Palace. As an adult, I came to understand that the whole freaking reason Conquest of the Crystal Palace is so good is because it is one of the first games made by Yasumi Matsuno. Tactics Ogre and the Evil East Final Fantasy setting. Like that guy. So it's this game is serious business. It's not that great, but like visually and thematically, it's great. It's because it's just great world building, which is what Matsuno does. It's just it's set in like a mythical China setting. It's just a pretty typical action side scroller where you're this kid on an adventure and your dog is with you and can help you, and you're going through this fantasy mythological China setting, and this is the first level of Conquest of the Crystal Palace music, which was actually composed by a gentleman named Mitsuyasa Tomohisa, who is a member of a band in Japan called the Jaywalk, which is actually quite prolific, it turns out. I didn't know this prior to doing some research for this episode. But it's just like, this is adventure video game music in an ancient China setting. It like it has all those like chord progressions you expect from like the like this is China like stereotypical sound.
Yeah. We call that a pentatonic scale in the know, don't you know?
Okay. Very good. Very good.
It's a thing. It's like you say, it's quite an easy way to make something sound like it's from the East, because a lot of traditional music from China in particular is based on this particular pattern. And the reason why sort of the stereotypical, possibly racist thing of going is associated with China is because that is just a pentatonic scale. If you play just the black notes on a piano, you've got something that sounds like it's from Eastern territories.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't know nothing about no music theory. I just know that this is adventure in China music. In many ways, as we were talking about with like early Castlevania, a lot of these 8-bit games, you can feel the influence of progressive rock in them. And like this feels like proto Dynasty Warriors music.
Yeah. It's all about that rhythm section again. It's all about that bass line and about the drums. So in this one, this uses quite a common sort of pattern that's heard in a lot of NES music, which is that sort of ongoing pattern in the bass line and the drums at the same time. And because those two different sounds are mirroring each other, it really emphasizes it. This has also got a common trick on the NES as well. I don't know how familiar you are with the NES's sound hardware, but it basically had, I can't remember if it's 3 or 4 channels that could generate waveforms, like I was talking about earlier. But it also had one channel that could do very small, very low quality samples, so it could use actual recorded sounds. And you can hear it in this one. If you hear like the snare drum that's coming in,
I was going to say it's the drum,
lovely sort of crunchy snare drum sound in this. That is a sample. It's a very low quality sample, but because it's so low quality, it's got this very distinctive crunchy sound to it, and that was used a lot in a wide variety of NES games, and it's a very iconic sound. So like I talked about how Super Castlevania sounds like the quintessential Super NES soundtrack, this track is very much sort of the quintessential NES soundtrack for me as well.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a great game. I mean, all the music is good, but this track, man. let's go. It's another just like Japanese, like, let's go. Like fist
definitely.
in the air.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I say, it's all in that rhythm to build up the adrenaline, to sort of push you forwards, to sort of make you feel like you should be constantly moving forwards, even if that's not necessarily the wisest thing to do in terms of game mechanics. You hear that piece of music, you think, I should be moving forwards now, I should be walking to the right.
Yeah, and there's something really lovely about the way it comes in like a round. Like, the rhythm comes in first, and, like, you maybe think it's gonna sound like a really traditional, like, pentatonic scale thing, but then the actual melody part kicks in, and then it has that, like, progressive Japanese video game sound on top of that rhythm. Like, yeah, it defies expectations a little bit. Like, it's just a great track.
Yeah, definitely. All right, the next one on my list then is the first level music from Wolfenstein 3D.
Oh yeah,
which is called "Get Them Before They Get You." So this is obviously another Western one rather than Japanese, but it was from the era when Western composers still kind of produced stuff with reasonably memorable themes to it. But there's a very obvious difference in kind of atmosphere and approach to how this is composed. This is a bit more atmospheric than some of the other ones that we've chosen. But again, it's got that solid use of rhythm to get you excited for the game. And in fact, the specific reason that I like this music is that I thought it complemented the loading screen in Wolfenstein really well. So on the original PC version of Wolfenstein, when you hit new game and choose your difficulty and so on, the first thing it does is that there's like this big full screen banner that says "Get Psyched." And like the combination of the words "get psyched" and this loading bar slowly filling up and the initial drum beat in this piece of music was just a perfect fusion of things to get you excited for what was about to happen.
I remember it well.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the overall soundtrack for Wolfenstein 3D, there are elements to it that have sort of dated a bit more than certain other aspects of some of the games that we've been talking about. So a lot of games from this era, and I think, if I remember correctly, Wolfenstein was composed by Robert Prince, I think, who did a lot of stuff for shareware games at the time. So he wrote a lot of the music for Wolfenstein, Doom 2, Duke Nukem, and so on. He's got very distinctive sound, and he uses like the 12-bar blues progression very frequently. You can hear that in Wolfenstein 3D. You can hear it in almost every single track on the Doom soundtrack as well. So many of them are based on the 12-bar blues format, even if it's not like a blues piece, it is using that chord progression, and once you're aware of it, it's very hard to unhear it. But so that's one thing that I'm very conscious of with Bobby Prince's work these days. But I think the fact that he manages to take that structure and do so many different creative things with it is sort of his real strength. Even if sometimes I do wish he'd been a bit more imaginative with some of his chord progressions, but certainly Wolfenstein 3D's first level music is one that stuck with me a lot over the years, purely for sort of the, I guess you call it the emotional impact it had when you were getting ready to start that game for the first time. It was just a perfect complement to starting that game.
Yeah, third comment on the YouTube page, get psyched.
Yep, exactly.
And just like, like I was talking about kind of when I was first musing about Shadow of the Ninja, like, is there a more perfect infiltration music than this? Yeah. Like, military infiltration mission, like, this is it, you are the last hope, get in the base. Like, like, perfect.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely perfect. All right, what's next for you?
What's next for me? Esperance Part 1 from Mischief Makers.
Ah. This is treasure, right? Am I remember that correctly? Yeah.
Yep. And I managed to keep my treasure games to only 2 today. my restraint for your benefit. Esperance Part 1. I love this track. Sometimes it gets me teary, and I don't even know why. There is a feeling in this track to me of like many things coming together.
Yeah.
It's the composer for this piece is Norio Hanzawa, who was pretty much like the Treasure composer. He worked on most of Treasure's legendary games, Gunstar Heroes, Guardian Heroes, Alien Soldier. He was even with them when they weren't Treasure, back in their early days working as a development house inside Konami, doing stuff like Bucky O'Hare and like Tiny Toons games.
Okay.
He's part of who they are. So like Norio Hanzawa's sound is very much the Treasure sound. And I had always loved their games, but there's something about Mischief Makers specifically because it's on the N64, which obviously had a more robust soundboard profile than what the Genesis had, but still not CD sound. So the N64 sound profile was still a little weird.
I have such a weird feeling towards the N64 soundboard because it was obviously capable, and there were certain games that could make it absolutely shine, but I found that, of all things, Nintendo's own stuff kind of made really poor use of it. So, like, I'm not a huge... a lot of people really like Ocarina of Time soundtrack.
Oh, I don't.
Soundtrack
it's annoying.
But the sounds used in those are, like, worse than the Super NES in a lot of cases. But then you listen to something like this that was on the same platform, and you think, well, why couldn't Nintendo do that?
Yeah, but then there are some games, like Mario 64, the soundtrack's amazing in Mario 64.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Ocarina of Time makes me want to kill myself. The Kokiri Forest, like, the sounds, I don't know, it's weird. Because, some games were great, though. Like, a lot of all Grant Kirkhope's work on the Banjo-Kazooie games is amazing, and obviously, Blast's Core, also
Blast Core's soundtrack is amazing,
Yeah, so, like, there's great stuff out there, but N64 had a weird balance of, like, really outright offensive to the ear or just unmemorable stuff. But Mischief Makers is one of the good ones.
Definitely.
And like every other theme I've pretty much brought up today, like, it communicates that sense of the beginning of an adventure, but it does it in a really different way than some of the other stuff did. Specifically, a lot of the other stuff I've brought up had a really strong focus on rhythm to like hype you up. But in the Mischief Makers music, there's a very consistent theme of like mystery and and like a questioning of the unknown, which kind of permeates this track, because the narrative of the game is that you're stranded on this planet, and it's a very strange planet, and there's just a ton of mysteries to solve, and like, what is going on here? It's weird. And you're this like sassy robot girl who like just doesn't want to put up with any of the bullshit. Like, let's get going, let's solve the problem. Like, everything about this track sounds like the perfect Saturday morning cartoon. There's a hint of fairy tale, a hint of like slapstick goofiness, the feeling of mystery and the feeling of adventure, all kind of coalescing in this odd, like techno robot-y, like beeps and boops. Like, it's just great.
Yeah. I haven't played this game a lot. I do own a copy. I haven't played it a lot, but from what I remember, it's a fairly weird game, isn't it? In a lot of ways,
almost inaccessible. It's a game that is like highly polarizing.
Yeah, but I mean, I think this piece of music gets that across really well. Particularly because if you listen to like the whatever that noise is that they're playing the main tune on, it's a weird noise.
Yeah, it's not natural. It's not an instrument.
Yeah. And it says this. I mean, it's obviously supposed to be something a bit like a vocal sample or something like that, but it's not quite right. But that really works in context of what the game is, because the game is weird and not quite right.
Yeah.
And so this just complements it perfectly.
Yeah, it's obtuse, it's inaccessible, it's bizarre. Yeah. But it's also like super heroic at the same time. It's all of that, plus you get a feel for like when that main crescendo hits, like near the end of the loop, and you feel like, yeah, Marina is this great hero. Like nothing's gonna stop her from like solving this problem. Like that's what it feels like, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, definitely.
And I get goosebumps. This one gives me goosebumps. I don't know why, because it's like goofy and clunky, but it just like for some reason it makes me emotional. And I'm sure nostalgia plays a part of it, but it like creates nostalgia for a Saturday morning cartoon that never existed.
Yeah, no. So sometimes stuff like that just gets you. Sometimes there are sort of associations that you made in your mind with it at the time as well that you might not necessarily be completely conscious of now, but you might be sort of remembering some of those associations as well. I know I've got a lot of certain pieces of music like that they hit me hard emotionally, but I can't really say why. They just do, and it's obviously something buried deep in my brain that I associate with that piece of music, and it's probably something like that going on there.
No doubt.
Yeah. Okay, moving down my list, got a biggie now. Final Fantasy VII. I mean, yeah. I tried to steer away from the really well-known ones, but Final Fantasy VII's bombing mission is just such a defining part of my adolescence. I couldn't not mention it. It's just,
of course.
Just like in fact, the whole intro sequence for Final Fantasy VII is just incredible still. And I was so pleased that they recreated it so perfectly in Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Oh, I nearly shat myself. The first time I played that demo.
Yeah, as when I played the demo for Final Fantasy VII Remake when that came out, and like I turned the music up really loud because I knew it was going to be good, and like it was so loud that my wife came in to tell me to turn it down, but she sort of came in. She was about to say, "Can you turn that shit down?" But like then she saw me, and I was like sitting on the sofa with tears in my eyes, and she was like, "Okay, I'll just back away.
we'll let it pass." Yeah.
I'll let you have this moment. But yeah, just this whole opening sequence for Final Fantasy VII. You've got this wonderful sort of panning down through the city, and you've got the bits with Aerith and all that sort of thing, and then bombing mission kicks in, and it is just the perfect, you've got a job to do, get in there and do it as quickly as you can. You don't need to rush through that beginning sequence at all, but this music makes it feel like you should. You need to get in there, you need to blow up that Mako reactor, you need to get this done, and it's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah, I mean, it really is.
Final Fantasy, I mean, obviously, like, Final Fantasy sets so many of the bars, right? And it's just like, the pressure on 7 to have an amazing opening was strong, because Final Fantasy, like, 4 kind of created that idea that, like, your RPG should have a massively cinematic opening, where like something amazing happens. It sets the tone for the rest of everything. And like, I don't remember the opening of 5 terribly well, but I do remember the opening of 6 very clearly. And like 7 brought that into the 32-bit generation, like with aplomb. So it's just, this track was so integral to the creation of that cinematic feel.
Yeah. Interestingly, I'm fairly convinced that the bombing mission theme was intended to be a direct homage to Final Fantasy IV's opening, because if you listen to the tune and the chord progression in it, they're almost identical.
Yeah.
If you listen to it carefully, if you listen to them side by side, they are very similar pieces of music. Obviously, the PlayStation one is a much fuller, richer sound because of the additional capabilities at the time. But I'm pretty sure that there was a deliberate attempt to sort of harken back to Final Fantasy IV specifically with that
part
theme.
of it can be that. Part of it could also just be Yasunori Mitsuda, Nobuo Uematsu.
Yeah.
Like, same composer, and like when someone goes to Uematsu and is like, make a military theme. Like it's gonna probably sound.
Yeah.
It's gonna it was very similar. It was a very similar opening in Final Fantasy IV, right? Like
exactly.
You are in the military. Yeah, this is a military mission. Like, execute with extreme prejudice. Like, yeah, I love it. But the very few. Like, that's like the textbook. Like that military feel in those opening moments. It's a very textbook way to like gear up that narrative.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I don't have a ton more I want to say about that specific one, but it is one that I really wanted to include in there just because it's of such personal importance to me, and I'm sure you as well. So.
Oh yeah. 13-year-old Chris is very partial to that track, and like I said, man, remake just did it right.
They nailed it. Absolutely.
If honestly, like my one buddy yelled at me for saying this, but like if FF7 remake was just like beat the guard scorpion, roll credits, that would have been enough game for me.
No, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah,
Jesse gets to live. Like it's like that would have been the fine for me. Like it was just that was just so perfect.
Yeah,
and they knew it had to be.
Yeah.
They knew it had to be. All right.
What have we got next from you then?
Radiant Silvergun.
Not a game I'm super familiar with, I must confess, but...
Oh, well, you have no history with the Saturn.
Yeah.
Really.
I listened to this piece of music and I thought, gosh, that sounds like Final Fantasy Tactics, doesn't it?
Hitoshi Sakamoto.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is not what I expect to hear from a shoot 'em up, but...
No. Well, that's why it's so memorable for me.
Yeah.
So... Radiant Silvergun is composed by Hitoshi Sakamoto, well known for FF Tactics, but also in his early days well known for shooters, specifically in the Saturn era. He worked with Rising a lot. He did the soundtrack to Armed Police Batrider, which is a great soundtrack. He also, not him specifically as composer, but his sound group, Bass Escape, did, with him directly working on it, did the soundtrack for Battle Garega, which is a really well-known soundtrack. So he is known very specific. There's a Hitoshi Sakamoto sound that I think everybody attributes to him, which is a very specific type of open, grand, orchestral feeling, with this scope of cinematic rolling. And like I often remember you and I, because you and I in our chats outside of the podcast are both tremendous fans of game music in general, if you haven't discovered that from listening to us talk for the past hour. We talk about game music a lot, and one of the things we've clashed on often is you not being a tremendous fan of Hitoshi Sakamoto's Final Fantasy work because it lacks some of that pounding rhythm and melody that we associate with Japanese game music. And that's what makes Radiant Silvergun's soundtrack interesting to me, is because it's the Hitoshi Sakamoto sound, but in a shoot 'em up, a vertical shoot 'em up with sweeping orchestral score. And there's only one word, right? When the Radiant Silvergun, this track is called The Return, which I think sounds just right. bells, man. Bells.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever heard church bells in a shmup opening track? The notion, like, so like narratively, you are part of like a defense force that orbits the planet. The planet's been overrun by this like unknown entity that like grew out of this like crystal that's been like unearthed, that's like taking control of like everything. And you are descending to Earth while these bells are playing. Like through the clouds, like burning on re-entry, and then you swoop in and like the stage begins. Like there's a very specific like cinematic presentation accompanying this track as it begins. And it's all kind of tied to the visual elements of the game as well. So the ship in Radiant Silvergun has a very unique design. It doesn't look like any other ship you've seen in a shoot-'em-up ship. And the shape and form of the ship in Radiant Silvergun was very specifically designed to evoke the image of an angel. Yeah. Like if you think about what like an angel Christmas tree topper looks like in profile, like that's what the ship of Radiant Silvergun looks like. So as like your ship descends to this embattled planet to save it, like the bells are tolling, and it's evoking this like biblical sense of like the savior coming down from on high to like put an end to this. And it's fitting. Like the track is fitting for this grand scope and scale. Radiant Silvergun is known very specifically for being it's a notoriously long shooter. Like that's why a lot of people don't like it, because like you can't sit down like bang out Radiant Silvergun for score in like 25 minutes. Like Radiant Silvergun takes like an hour to play through. There's like massive set pieces and like tons of bosses. Like it is an undertaking. So like I don't think a traditional hectic techno infused shmup soundtrack would have made sense for Silvergun. It's a very different thing. So
that makes sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
But there is still some melody in there. There's that heroic theme that kicks in once the bells are done. And it's something totally different, and it defies your expectation. But it gives you the feels. It gives you the heroic feels.
Yeah, definitely. Like I say, it's not a game I'm familiar with, but from what you described there, I can see it. I can see how that beginning would go, and what it would look like, and what it would feel like. Is Radiant Silvergun one of the ones that they randomly released on Xbox Live Arcade, or am I thinking of something else?
I don't know. I don't know where Radiant Silvergun is available. I think you might be able to get it on Steam.
I have a vague memory of seeing it somewhere like weird that you wouldn't expect it, but I would have to look into that, because that's definitely piqued my interest there, for sure.
It's on the Microsoft Store, so yes. You can get it on the Xbox Arcade. It's worth it. It's worth it, man. It's if you can imagine Treasure and their approach to gaming, which is just everything. Like, make it big, make it bold, whatever you can think of, throw it in there. And now imagine what it would be like if they made a vertical shooter.
Yeah.
Everything is just full of bombast and scale. And there's a reason this game is like legendary.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, I know what I'm doing later then.
I think you'll appreciate it.
All right. Okay, continuing on then. A bit of a change in theme. The next one I've got is not technically what you'd call a first level theme as such, because it's from a Western RPG, but it's the first battle theme that you hear in Baldur's Gate, which is called Attacked by Assassins. Now, the Baldur's Gate soundtrack in general is kind of notorious for being a gratuitous rip-off of the Conan the Barbarian soundtrack.
Well, if you're gonna rip off, man, you can do a lot worse than Basil Polidorus.
Exactly. This track is one of the ones where it's especially apparent, but I just love this track because Western RPGs that I played prior to Baldur's Gate had either been fairly light on the music or they had taken a very sort of atmospheric approach. So, for example, I'd play stuff like Diablo, and Diablo is very heavy on ambience rather than actual tuneful music, except when you're in the town. So Diablo has this strong contrast between you're out in the town now, so here's some music, and you're in the dungeon now, so here's some spooky noises.
Yeah, here's dripping.
Baldur's Gate, on the other hand, gave like this incredibly dramatic battle music. And there was also this slight element of absurdity about it as well, because in Baldur's Gate you start off as this sort of fairly normal person just hanging out in this walled city of Candlekeep, and you get the stereotypical first RPG quest, which is, oh, my cellar is full of rats, would you mind going and dealing with them? And so the first fight you have in the game is against a bunch of rats, and it's accompanied by this music, and it's just brilliant.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. I mean, this battle theme comes back in several other areas, but it's actually quite a long time in the game between you hearing this piece of music for the first time in that ridiculous first battle and you hearing it again in a more fitting context.
I was going to say, this is epic. This is an epic track.
And so when it comes back later in the game, you're like, oh yeah, this is a cool piece of music, and I want to hear it again more. So yeah, it's... I don't know, it's just a great piece of music, but I've also just got this wonderful memory of the absurdity of a level 1 fighter with a battered old sword in someone's cellar attacking a bunch of rats and going and sort of failing to hit them half of the time because this is 2nd edition D&D. But yeah, Baldur's Gate soundtrack generally some of the finest work in sort of Western RPGs still. Baldur's Gate 2 has got some great tracks as well, but the first one will always be sort of particularly special to me.
Did you get those remasters they did on the modern consoles?
I didn't know. I've actually still got my old copies of the original ones, and I think I've definitely got Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, possibly the original versions on GOG.com, so I didn't sort of really feel the need to get the remastered ones. But
Sure. Because they did like double packs. You can get like Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 in one pack, and then they did I think it was Icewind Dale, and
they did Icewind Dale, and they did Neverwinter Nights as well.
Yeah, and you can get that double packs too. It's like be cool to have those on the Switch, play those handheld. Yeah. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. Those are all sort of quite nice games to have on the go, actually, because although they are each huge adventures in their own right, the structure of them is such that they're quite friendly to sort of dipping in and out of, because they're heavily quest-based and sort of like heavily based on sort of self-contained little stories and things. So
sure, you
could quite easily sit down and play a bit of Baldur's Gate and just play through a quest line and then put it aside for a bit and then come back to it later and so on. So yeah, they would be a good fit for Switch, actually. I might have to see if I can nab some copies of those at some point. Neverwinter Nights as well. This is obviously getting very off topic now, but Neverwinter Nights I have some very fond memories of as well, because it had an amazing multiplayer mode in that one. I don't know if you ever encountered that at all, but Neverwinter Nights is, I believe, one of the only D&D games you could play multiplayer where you could have an actual dungeon master player.
Okay.
And so that meant you could have someone who was controlling all of the enemies and manipulating the world and sort of doing things in real time as the players were exploring and that sort of thing. And it just made for some of the most amazing multiplayer experiences I've ever had.
Very cool.
So Neverwinter Nights soundtrack sounded quite a lot like Baldur's Gate as well, so there's sort of a connection there. So I hear music from Baldur's Gate and from any of that era of D&D games on the PC, and I have these really positive associations with that. So not only is it a cool piece of music, it sort of takes me back to sort of happy times as well. So
Sure.
All right, what's next for you?
We got Ninja Warriors again. which I guess in the US was just Ninja Warriors because we didn't actually get the first one. but Ninja Warriors again is the second piece in my list today by Hiroyuki Iwatsuke of Natsume fame. And I don't know if there's a whole hell of a lot I can say about Ninja Warriors again that didn't also apply to Shadow of the Ninja. It's just like it's an essential ninja theme. It opens in a way that perfectly communicates infiltration mission. Secret agent spy infiltration mission. But what's interesting about the way this track sounds, there's kind of moments where it has a tone of kind of sadness and desperation to it, which ties into the narrative of the game. The story of the Ninja Warriors franchise is that, the world's been overrun by this merciless military dictator. There is a resistance group in the underground, using some of the technology stolen from this group. You're launching a last-ditch effort, and you've built these ninja automatons. So that they can go in, they're robots, they have no conscience, they have no hang-ups about killing, and they can just go hog wild and destroy this regime from the inside. There's something about this track that communicates the combined elements of the spy infiltration mission with the sadness and desperation of a resistance group pushed to their last straw. This is the only chance, right? If these robots fail to do this mission, if this attack fails, the resistance has put all of their lives on the line. They've put all their resources into this last push. If this fails, there's nothing. If this fails, evil wins. And you hear that in this track. Yeah.
You've got the technology aspect in there as well, haven't you? Because all of the sounds in this are very artificial. So the main theme is played on a very artificial sounding synth line. So you've got that. These are technological weapons that we're sending in there. I do love from this artwork, by the way, that the two dude ninjas are super robotic looking, and then there's cute girl ninja as well.
But she's a robot.
Yeah, she's totally a robot with long blonde hair. But yeah, this fits in with so many of the things that we've talked about there. We've got that driving rhythm. We've got the use of slap bass is very common in this sort of thing because that's quite an energetic sound. You've got quite a complex drum line in this one as well. You got instead of just like a straight rock rhythm, you got lots of fills and stuff in here that's sort of giving it this very kind of elaborate feel, which fits in with the sort of infiltration theme. Because you often have to sort of think on the fly and things don't always go as you expect it to, so the rhythm is all over the place and that sort of thing. So yeah, there's a lot going on in this track that is very, very appropriate for the game itself.
Yeah, this is Iwatsuki at the top of his game. Just the best. It was, like I said, I really struggled. And when I actually looked at my list, so one of the things I did was I built my list. Then I went back and did my research on composers. My original list had 4 Iwatsuki tracks on it, which I pared down to 2.
What were the other ones, just out of interest?
The other ones were the first level theme from Wild Guns.
Oh yeah, yep.
And the first level theme from Shatterhand.
Yeah.
Which are all just incredible tracks. But and I can always talk about those in a future episode. But yeah, he's just very good at what he does, and he came back, of course, both Wild Guns and Ninja Warriors. Again, both received those amazing, enhanced retro ports on modern consoles. And he remixed all the music for them, with modern, modern remixes of them using the same exact track, but not limited by the Super Nintendo. And they're amazing. You can imagine how suitably epic this track sounds without any hardware restrictions.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just, I would say it would not be hyperbole to say this track is probably my top 5 video game themes of all time, irrespective of genre. Like,
Yeah,
I love this track.
I can understand that. Absolutely.
And I will play this game. I will just play level 1. Like, if I'm having a miserable day, I will fire this game up just to play this game and, like, experience. Because it's not just about listening to the music, right? With a lot of these themes, it's the way the music, as I've said on a couple examples, ties to what you're doing and the gameplay and the feel of the action. It's just like...
Yeah.
When this is playing and you're freaking jump kicking soldiers in the face and they're like exploding and then you backflip and then like throw a shuriken at the guy sneaking up behind you and like this is playing and it's just like it's so good.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Sort of one of my criteria for picking the stuff on this list was how likely am I to boot up this game just to play the first level?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And, yeah.
Have you played this game ever?
I have played... Yes, I have. I'm trying to think what context I played it in. I think I
mentioned it in the previous podcast, and you played it to get footage.
Yeah, that was probably it. I think it was sort of just before the new versions released. You were talking about it, and so I played the Super NES version. It was like, oh, this is good, isn't it? I actually still haven't picked up the Switch version. I think you can get a physical copy. It's one of those ones you can get a physical copy of fairly easily in Europe. So
yep, it was published for retail. It's not like a limited press thing.
I will have to try and nab a copy of that because I did really enjoy what I played. So
it's amazing.
Yeah,
it's mechanically very unique. It's one of my favorite games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I mean the whole series is. I picked this track because of how much I love it specifically. But the first level music from the original Ninja Warriors is legendary.
Yeah.
Daddy Molk it's called, and it's one of the most beloved remixed tracks from this sound team ever. There's a wonderful legendary live performance of it from the 80s that circulates all the time on YouTube, and it's amazing because Iwatsuki's there. And I think, oh god, why can't I remember his name? The guy who did most of the music for the early Tales of games. Shoot, I can't remember his name. I love him. He did all Valkyrie Profile. He does a lot of stuff with Tri-Ace. He did all of Star Ocean. I'm just drawing a blank, but he is there playing the keyboard in this concert like a fresh-faced 19-year-old him, just like
is it Sakuraba?
Yeah, that's it. Motoi Sakuraba. Yeah, he's there. It's amazing. And then there's a part in that track Daddy Molk where all the techno stuff stops and there's a shamisen solo. And
awesome.
Obviously that's digital in the game version, but in the live performance, the whole band stops and a dude comes out with a shamisen in traditional clothing with the headband on, and I'll send it to you. It's a treat.
Amazing.
It's one of the Daddy Molk is also legendary because it's a track that doesn't loop.
Yeah.
It's as long as the level takes to beat. It's one track.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I do love that. Which
rarely happens. It's very long with no loop. There's a ton of stuff happening in it. It's epic.
Yeah.
So that's one for another day, even though I pretty much just described what makes it so amazing.
Yeah. Oh, you're spending all my money this evening, aren't you? All right, anyway.
I'm a bad influence, man. My friends' wives and girlfriends do not like me.
All right, continuing on. I just got a couple more now. One that I want to bring up, very big change of tone now. The Chapter 1 theme from Corpse Party.
Oh yeah, this is really an interesting track.
This is not my favourite track from Corpse Party, but it is one of the most memorable ones. And the fact that this is sort of your introduction to Corpse Party is really interesting. So Corpse Party, if you're not familiar, this is a series of games that started as actually an RPG Maker game. But the more well-known versions over the years are there was a PSP version called Blood Covered, which was basically a complete remake of the game for PSP, and there's a 3DS version which is slightly different to the PSP version, but still incorporates sort of the main story beats, the same characters, and I think some of the same music. But the interesting thing about Corpse Party's soundtrack is it's so weird, because it fits the game, but it's also not what you would expect from a horror game. Corpse Party is a really nasty horror game. It is exceedingly violent. It does horrible, horrible things to its characters. It is full of people screaming and suffering and really nasty things happening. But it's got this oddly chipper soundtrack to it that has elements of chiptunes about it, and it's got this sort of strong, nice melody about it. But at the same time, there's this air of menace about it as well that is just absolutely magical.
Yeah, and this is peak OST. I love this.
Yeah. And I think it just sort of highlights sort of that real juxtaposition that is going on in Corpse Party, because Corpse Party is like sort of very colourful and anime in a lot of ways. It's full of cute girls who occasionally flash their panties and that sort of thing, but it's also these cute girls often meet really horrible grisly ends as well. And I think that's reflected partly in the soundtrack as well. There is this sort of sinister undertone to the music, but it's also got this cheerful aspect to it, these melodic passages and that sort of thing. And it's just, anytime I play Corpse Party, I get shivers down the spine when I hear this music, just because it's like, oh, this is really quite uncomfortable.
Like, narratively, isn't like the whole thing Corpse Party, like the main bad guy is this like little girl ghost who's like devious, and like she's having fun with it.
Yeah, exactly.
So like that's what this sounds like. Is like little girl ghost is sadistic. Like that's what this sounds like to me.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Sachiko in Corpse Party is a wonderful villain because you don't see her that often, but when you do see her, there's this balance between, oh, she's this cute little adorable girl, and then like she cuts someone's eye out with a pair of scissors, and you're like, ah. Yeah. And yeah, just this track reflects it perfectly. And the Corpse Party soundtrack as a whole, it escalates as it goes through. So it starts off with this theme that we're talking about here, and as the chapters advance, there's 5 chapters in it, and each chapter just sort of escalates the intensity of that music. It doesn't use the same theme and sort of remix it, but it increases in... Things get more serious as you go through until you reach the final chapter that I will share with you now. I've probably shared this with you before, but by the time you get to this final chapter and you are hearing... is it this one? This piece of music instead. Yeah, it is obviously... Shit has got real time. And so by the time you reach the end of the game, you're like, okay, right, party is over, we need to do something about this. And it just escalates really nicely to that point, but it's still keeping that sort of anime bounciness to it as well. Yeah, and it's just incredibly memorable.
This track sounds like it belongs in a shmup.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's cool. Yeah, I've always... I'm not really a fan of, like, hard horror games. I only have... Bizarrely enough, like, how much I love horror movies, I'm not a huge fan of horror games. So I've never really gotten into this series, but, like, I'm aware of, like, how like, legendary it is, especially in, like, the types of circles we run in.
Yeah.
But yeah, this first theme is amazing. And it's, like, one of my favorite things in horror is when you can communicate the unease that even though you're not having fun, your tormentor is. And that's what this sounds like perfectly.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, what's next for you?
Next for me, well, I wanted... most of my stuff is old stuff. Most of my stuff doesn't go past the 32-bit era. Most of it's 8 and 16-bit stuff. So I really wanted to make sure to focus on one modern indie title. And I couldn't really think of a more goosebumpy, make me cry just by thinking about it, piece of music than the Dragon Valley theme from Freedom Planet.
Perfect.
Cause I goddamn love Freedom. Yeah. This is not a surprise to our listeners. This is the extent to which we have raved about Freedom Planet consistently. The Freedom Planet soundtrack is amazing. It's massive. Pretty much all of it is incredible. It's composed by a group of two people working together, Leilani Wilson, who goes by Woofle, and Sabrina Dodoro, who is the series creator, who goes by Strife when she's composing. They both have very different styles, and apparently, according to stories, they clashed quite a bit when working on the soundtrack, because Strife wanted a lot more intensity to the soundtrack, and Leilani Wilson, Woofle, wanted... just an easy, laid-back, going-with-the-flow sound. So what often happened was the two kind of meet together in a lot of these tracks, where there's unique, kind of relaxing, organic elements posed with a lot of the stuff we've been talking about, this driving, rhythmic sense of adventure, and it creates a really unique soundscape. It's kind of unlike anything I've ever heard before. Even though Freedom Planet in many ways is kind of attempting to evoke a Sonic game, a 16-bit Sonic game, this music doesn't feel like Sonic music.
No.
It's wholly unique. Freedom Planet's music is one of my favorite indie soundtracks by a long mile. I mean, there are days of my life when I'm working where I just listen to this soundtrack on loop for 9-hour work days. I am obsessed with this soundtrack, and this track is part of it because it's really one of the first major tracks you get to hear. It sounds completely new, like I mentioned, different, it's modern, it's different from anything else in the market, but yet somehow, because it's made by people with the same kind of nostalgia we have, just like I was kind of talking about with that Saturday morning cartoon feel with Mischief makers, it makes you nostalgic for something that doesn't even really exist, even though the game itself is less than 10 years old.
Yeah.
It makes me feel like I've been playing Freedom Planet my entire life when I hear this track. Yeah. And I've only been playing Freedom Planet for 4 years since I got it on Steam. It doesn't have a connection to my past, but it feels like it does because of the way it's written and the way the music sounds. And in this track in particular is really emblematic of the game in general, like most of the tracks we've discussed today. It communicates a feel of hominess, and a coziness, and there's these kind of tribal rhythms and sounds where it's kind of also communicating a love of nature, which is a really important component of the game, and a deference to tradition, and then obviously the heroic tonal elements and chord progressions come in, so you get the heroic rousing theme part of it, but it's also cozy and loving, and the whole point of Freedom Planet is to defend this planet that's being ravaged by this alien invader, with whatever just scrappy friends you can gather and like whatever you can do. It's just like, this is your home. You love your home. Now you must defend your home. And like this opening track, Dragon Valley, makes you feel that love for your home in a very special way.
Yeah,
I think.
The soundtrack as a whole to Freedom Planet, like you say, is amazing, and it does a really good job of doing what I just described with Corpse Party as well, in sort of escalating the stakes as you go through until you reach the final Dreadnought tracks in the soundtrack, which are just some of the most goosebump-inducing, shiver-down-the-spine finale sequences that I've ever heard, particularly when you combine with... I don't know if you've actually beaten the game yet, but I've talked about this before. But to your shame. Yeah, the finale sequence in Freedom Planet. I've only beaten it with Lilac, but just her finale sequence is just so over the top, amazing, and emotional. It's a proper emotional gut punch by the time you reach the final boss, and you're like, whoa. And a big part of that is the music, and it's just this gradual sense of escalation through the music, through the cutscenes, through the voice acting, through the context of what's going on. It's just the whole game is just an absolute masterpiece. It really is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just so emotionally evocative in so many different ways, and the themes just fit every level so perfectly. You've got to play as Carol so you can play my favorite sequence, the trap hideout stage.
Oh yes,
that's my favorite part of the whole game, and my favorite music tracks in the whole game is the trap hideout themes. Just amazing stuff. I'm a big fan. Like I back when I was on social media, I followed Woofle. I would just like fanboy at her like all the time. And I think she's got some independent albums out now, and more hewing towards like the laid back side of the Freedom Planet stuff that are worth listening to. Not game music, just like I've released these albums of original tracks.
Yeah,
it's quite good.
Cool. All right. Well, my last one then for today is sort of, I guess you'd say, in a similar sort of vein to Freedom Planet. Really, I don't know if I called Shantae an indie game at this point, but yeah, the Shantae Half Genie Heroes opening. With the song by, and we're not allowed to call her Christina V anymore, are we? What is it? Christina Velasquez now, I think you're supposed to call her.
Oh, yeah. When did that change?
She just decided to embrace her heritage a bit more, I think, and asked everyone to call her by her full name.
Fair enough.
Good for her.
I'm not on social media, so if Gematsu or Silicon Era didn't write an article about it, I don't know anything about it.
But yeah, anyway, regardless, the sort of beginning of Shantae Half Genie Hero, where your platforming is accompanied by this song. This one thing we haven't really talked about today is when you play a game and there's a song when you're playing. I love that.
Well, you know it's down to business now, right? You know this is it.
Yeah, and I mean it's there being a song in a piece of music is like something that when I was playing sort of 8 and 16-bit games, I was thinking, wow, wouldn't this be cool if there was like someone singing over the top of this? That would make it like super cool, wouldn't it? And like when that started to happen for the first time in sort of 32-bit era and beyond, I was like, yes, this is exactly what I hoped it would be. And the opening to Shantae Half Genie Hero sort of really captured that feel for me. It was a very strong opening for the game. It introduced the character really nicely. And it gave you that sort of sense of adventure. What sort of character Shantae is. She dances through the danger. It's what she is. And it's super evocative. Love it.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, this whole soundtrack, just incredible. I mean, Jake Kaufman is, he's the best. He's so good. Yeah. I mean, Shantae, it's perfect. This is Shantae's theme song, right? It's Alternatively to the Burning Town theme, which is one of the usual first opening area themes for Shantae, is also like absolutely classic.
Yes, I think the thing I like about this track is that there is a version of Burning Town in Half Genie Hero as well, but the thing I like about this track is it kind of evokes the same feeling as Burning Town does, but is a unique piece of music in its own right as well.
Yeah.
So it's got that similar kind of feeling to it, but it feels perfect. It just feels perfectly in place for a Shantae game. Yeah.
Yeah, and like very, comes up, again, everything about the writing in Shantae, the presentation of Shantae, it's criminal that there is no Shantae animated series.
Yeah.
And like this just feels like the opening music sequence to the Shantae anime series that doesn't exist. Right? Like this feels like the opening credits. Gearing you up for a new episode of adventure with your friends. Yeah. Like it's just so good.
Yeah. Oh, I just correct myself. It's Cristina Valenzuela, not Cristina Velasquez. I do apologize.
Okay.
So I'll just correct myself on that. But yes, that is how she prefers to be referred to now. So there you go.
Okay.
Anyway, so that is all of my picks. Have you got any more you want to share with us?
Got one more. Kept it to a tight 10. We're only talking about this 2+ hours. Gotta be reasonable. The opening level to R-Type 3, the Third Lightning.
Okay.
I love R-Type. R-Type doesn't love me.
R-Type doesn't love anyone.
No, just how long was that Corone stream where she refused to stop playing R-Type?
It was like 9 hours. She was playing it for 9 hours non-stop.
Didn't management have to shut her down? Like I don't even think she beat it. I think management was like, you have to stop. Like we can't let you work more than 9 hours straight without a break. Like, you must stop. Like... But yeah, R-Type loves nobody. If R-Type isn't nice to Corone, then R-Type can't be nice to anybody. Mm-hmm. So yeah, R-Type is, of course, IREM's legendary horizontal shooter series, known for its plotting, pace, and extreme difficulty. Generally speaking, R-Type themes communicate kind of a very similar theme. Usually like determination, but not in the same way a lot of these tracks we've been... Not a way a lot of these tracks we've talked about today have communicated determination and heroism and like, I can do this. Like, R-Type themes have always kind of communicated like, I have to do this. Like, this is the last hope. And that kind of military feeling of like determined to fulfill your mission is always backed up by like unease and fear of the alien unknown. Like body horror and like fear. Because that's what R-Type is. It's about combating a hideous alien threat that can morph and take on disturbing forms. But I specifically picked the track from R-Type 3 because it feels different than other R-Type tracks in a way that is really special. Unlike R-Type 1 and 2 and any of the spin-offs, there's something about the track in R-Type 3 that feels distinctly triumphant and defiant. Like, it communicates to me that you're finally taking the fight back to the Baido Empire. This isn't a track of defense. This isn't a track of last resort. This is a track of aggression. Unlike other R-Type themes, the first level of R-Type is really designed in a very specific way to make you feel really empowered. it's actually quite a bit easier than our other previous R-type levels, and that's very explicitly on purpose. So it makes you feel like a badass. These like faux Super Nintendo electric guitars are like wailing away. There's a friggin' guitar solo in it. It makes you feel like you can do anything. You get in these conflicts with these giant robots with like plasma rifles, and they're focusing so hard on firing at you that they forget to pay attention, and they fly backwards into stage elements and explode before you can even kill them. Like, you are a threat. The enemy is panicking. And like this track makes you feel that way. Yeah. And it's all a clever ruse. Because level it's on purpose. It's to make you feel falsely secure in your might and your abilities, because then level 2 it's just immediately, oh fuck, it's R-type. And then, so like, enjoy it while it lasts in level 1. Enjoy this feeling of power, enjoy this feeling of ability, enjoy this feeling of competency and strength, because you will be robbed of it immediately.
Yeah.
But goddamn, this first track.
I'll tell you the vibe I get from this first track. Like you say, it is quite markedly different from the other stuff we talked about today, in that a lot of the other stuff we talked about today is like sort of bright-eyed, bushy-tailed adventurer going out on an adventure and sort of ready for action and ready to face whatever the world is whatever challenges they're going to be faced with and that sort of thing. This track is a guy with unkempt hair, scars all over his face, maybe a couple of fingers missing, smoking a cigarette, going like, fuck you, I'm gonna take you down now. And he's like stepping up to the plate, and he's pissed off. He is absolutely pissed off at these enemies, and he's going to go and fuck them up. Yeah,
that's exactly what this is. This track is, I have nothing to lose. You have taken everything from me. I will kill you. I know it will kill me to kill you. Like, that's what this track is. And it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. Yeah. So that's my 10 first level, first area game music tracks today.
Yeah. Well, that was quite a lengthy discussion. But yes, I think we certainly did the subject matter justice, and as you say, there are so many other tracks we could talk about just on this subject.
I could do this till I die.
Just on the subject of first levels, there are so many more that I could have picked for this one, but
I haven't even mentioned any games by Telenet or Wolf Team. Like, that's a whole nother.
Oh, but yes, we have to call time somewhere, so I think the 2-hour mark is as good as anywhere.
For just this discussion, there's 2 segments before we started talking about games. We cannot control ourselves.
Anyway, that was a good discussion. I enjoyed that a lot, and I hope everyone listening did too as well. So, before we wrap up then, do you want to tell people where they can find your stuff online?
Sure, you can see and purchase my artwork at ckaskyart.com. I've also got a rather nice gallery of all of my work historically presented on my DeviantArt gallery page, which you can find by searching for my old screen name, Mr. Gilder, MrGilder.
Marvelous stuff. And like I said, you can find my stuff on MoeGamer.net that I've done up until this point. At the moment, I'm sort of scaling back the stuff I'm doing every week on that because of my day job at Rice Digital. But you will still find the ongoing mega features on the Atelier series and the work of Bizarre Creations going on over there as well as posts announcing the various videos that I've done. You'll find me on YouTube at youtube.com/Pete Davison with the Atari A to Z series. You'll also find the Rice Digital YouTube channel at youtube.com/Rice Digital, and doing a bunch of stuff on there now. If there's anything in particular you would like to see on that channel, do please let me know, because we're just sort of experimenting with different things at the moment to see what people like and what they want to see more of. And as I say, you'll find my writing every day during the daytime at ricedigital.co.uk as well. So lots of places you can find my work these days. Just remains for us to say, as always, thank you very much for watching and or listening, especially on such an epic episode as this one. And we'll see you again next time.